You're listening to Megiddo Radio. Megiddo Radio is a radio ministry of Megiddo Media. For more, visit our website at megiddoradio.com. That's megiddoradio.com.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. This is Paul Flynn with Megiddo Radio for the 28th of December, 2017. Thank you all for tuning in. On tonight's show, we're going to be doing something a little bit different from normal. For last couple of years, I noticed other programs would do, looking back at whatever year it was at the time, and I was tempted to do it a number of years, but I kind of didn't really want to do it because it would be just me and basically echo back and forth. And I remember a few weeks ago, I got the idea, a good friend of mine, somebody I've been kind of emailing back and forth for, I don't know how many, maybe about a year and a half now. Brandon Lochridge, I have him on the program here. I've dragged him on the program. Brandon Lochridge of Full Armor Radio. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here.
Could you just tell us a little bit about your ministry? You're also involved in, I was going to say Berean Beacon.
Modern Berean. Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So this venture started, it began with Modern Berean. Roughly, it was, I believe it was August of 2016. And a friend of mine, Steve Hogan, he and I, we had been at church together. We'd been doing ministry at church together. And we both had a very similar passion to use the gifts that the Lord had given us. We were very, very studious. Both of us enjoyed just digging into God's Word. We enjoyed reading the works of old, the Reformers, the Puritans, and we just really felt we prayed about it and felt led to start some sort of radio ministry together. And so, excuse me, I had been reviewing your material for probably about, I don't know, six to 9 months prior to that. And I remember thinking, I don't know anything about this podcasting stuff. I don't know anything about the whole, YouTubing. And I thought, I wonder if this guy, Paul Flynn, would respond to an email, just for the heck of it. Let's see if I could send him an email and see if I can get a response. And you were extremely gracious in responding and helping out and providing a lot of really good information. And so we kicked off Modern Berean. We started doing as a YouTube ministry, and eventually we switched to doing just podcast only. Because as you know, video editing and all that stuff is very, very time consuming, and we are both extremely busy in our day jobs. And so we switched to just doing podcasting. Well, in December of 2016, I started a thing on the side, which was Full Armor Radio, and that developed what I wanted to do, because what Steve and I were doing is we had been going through books of the Bible and just kind of verse by verse, kind of as sort of like a Bible study, like an online YouTube, podcast Bible study. And so with Full Armor Radio, I really wanted to dive into some deeper doctrines, and I thought there was no better place to do that than to go through the Confessions. And so I started with the Westminster Confession of Faith, actually, and as my own theology developed more, I actually switched over to going through the Second London Baptist Confession, and we've just been rolling through that. It's been a blessing. I don't think there's any greater blessing than to go through the confessions and just dive into those doctrines and just dig into the Word as you do so. And so it's really been a blessing, and it's been able to have you on a couple of times, and that's been great. You've been gracious and coming onto the program. And so that's just a little bit about the ministry as it sits. So
very good, very good. Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes people might be a bit afraid to contact me and get films@gmail.com. But it's just like, especially if it's questions, sometimes I try to respond as much as possible to everybody, within reason. Sometimes there's the odd email, and I'll be honest, it's kind of a bit of a book, and those are not always ones I respond to, if I'm being honest. Just because I've got two kids and a wife that I like spending time with. But like, if I can, to anybody starting, there's been a few times over the years that there's been a couple of people over the years have told me they're starting podcasts and all that. I've seen really no material since then, but I don't know. It's like, I'd like to encourage people to get it in the right people. If you're ready, if not everybody, it's a very different thing to be called in the ministry than to feel maybe you've got skills. I mean, a lot of the time it's usually people who they've got a lot of research done, and they want some means of getting it out there. That's why I got into film. I got into film not because I was a filmmaker or anything like that. I'm not. I'm learning as I go along, and that's the kind of way I am with film. But then there's even with the narration, I'm kind of you should have heard the first material I put out. It's pretty really bad. But like, you're kind of learning as you go along, and it's kind of a means to an end. You're trying to get information out there. Radio is another way of doing it. Writing articles, and the thing about it is, go with what your area is. Don't try and go beyond it. Don't try to answer every single topic. And I don't want to say like stick to your lane. Try and learn. Try and be balanced. Try to study whatever you can study, and keep it biblical. Now, on this program, what we're going to try and do is go over the year 2017 and talk about as much as we can talk about in, I don't know how long this program's going to go. I brought some coffee, so we'll see. We're gonna see a bit more relaxed show than normal. I kind of look, media. I've heard people say to me, I remember years ago I told somebody I was preaching and I was really nervous about it. Will you pray for me? And it's like, oh, but I've heard you on the podcast. Like, no, preaching is completely different to podcasting. Yeah. It just they're apples and oranges. I know you're there is. I mean, sometimes there's a way to do Christian podcasting, I believe, and there are some pros out there who I still learn from and stuff like that in radio. But the thing about it is, I don't think it has to be super serious, but I do think you can't. Yeah, there's sometimes it can get a bit out of hand and become a bit goofballish, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you know what I can say, I've been blessed with opportunities at my church to teach, in classes and teach from the Word of God. And I can't tell you, I mean, to this day, I just did one probably a few weeks ago. I taught on some church history in one of the classes in our church. And every single time, regardless of how many times I've done it over the years, every single time I get up in front of a group of people and you've got all these eyes staring at you and you're delivering the word of God, it's I get nervous. I get butterflies in my stomach every single time. But with the podcast, obviously, and that's the thing, you've talked about this before, Paul, is that anybody can do this. Anybody can purchase the equipment and go and start, but
that's what worries a lot of people. Anybody can
and
do
that's the thing. Well, and yeah, exactly. But that's the
with
thing.
Good reason a lot of the time.
Indeed. But you think that you think about it, this kind of radio ministry, there's very little accountability, and so you can get people just going and saying anything, and that's why it's always important to bring it back to the Word of God. Is what's being said? Is it being good Bereans? Is this what the Word of God says? And it's very different when you're in front of a bunch of people in a room. And you're preaching God's word. You get different looks and different things, and you go. You really have to. It's more of a nerve-wracking.
And it's not to discourage people. I've been back and forth exactly when to go in, and I don't want to be too. Anybody. There's a balance between not being too maverick, and radio's radio. Yeah. You can get. It's not the same thing as preaching in the church or anything. You can have women who are, some of them I know off the top of my head in Christian media, and they're excellent on the radio, and they're pros, and like when I started studying the regulative principle of worship and things like that, you kind of go, oh, where does it apply? You got to, it's to worship. Now, there's other contexts where, people can bless each other. I can read books from different people who may not necessarily be, maybe, I don't want to say qualified or not qualified, but just not called by the church. You want to be accountable. You have to be, if you're going to do a podcast, we're going to get on to the next topic. We're going to finally get into 2017 in a second. Make sure, right? Make sure you're a church member. If you're not a church member, you've, get that sorted first. Make sure you're a faithful church member, and make sure you're doing the basics right. Okay. Mm-hmm. I want to. I don't listen to many podcasts anymore. I'll be honest. It's gone down. I used to listen to everything years ago, and it's just gone down. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to start listening to stuff again. Actually, there is one or two things I listen to, but probably lack of time. Anyway, let's go through the stories of the year. I think you gave me a great list, actually. We're just going to go from, the first one is Bethel, and they've been in the news back and forth a few times. Mm-hmm. There was a tarot card story recently, and I looked at some of the videos, from Pulpit Pen, who we'll talk about later. But like there's Bethel Church, and the tragic passing of Nabeel Qureshi. I got one or two emails from people just saying, was I going to talk about Nabeel's passing? And I just felt, no, I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm not going to deal with it. I just felt any of the objections, and my main objection was what happened at the end of Nabeel's life. I don't know a lot about prior to that. I used to share quite a number of his videos, especially the ones that we've been talking about Islam, things like that. He seemed to be an extremely nice guy. It's heartbreaking. He's like, I think he's about my age, a daughter, a young wife, all that. So I just said, leave it alone, let them grieve. But the problem is, near the end of his life, he gave legitimacy to a very nefarious group, Bethel Church in Redding, California, pastored by Bill Johnson, whitewashed by people like Michael Brown, etc., and so on. And I think I don't know. What do you think? Like, you live in California. What is the perception of Bethel in California, where you're from?
Yeah, the very first exposure I had to Bethel was my father-in-law, who is always great at finding the newest heresies. I'll say, he's really good at that. But he first told me about Bethel, and he said, "Hey, do you know that there's a church up in Redding, California that releases glory clouds into their worship service?" I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And so he proceeded to kind of explain what was going on there, and I was floored at this. Sort of the mystical deception that has come out of Bethel. I mean, it's worse than that, but
not even mystical. I mean, it's stuff apparently that was bought down to the local shop that was just stuck into the ventilator or whatever they did.
Right.
And this, it's astonishing. You can see this on YouTube. Go to Bethel's YouTube page, and they have this gold stuff coming down from the sky, and it's got majority likes. I'm just like, what's going on?
It is bizarre, and I think it's really sad to me, because what it shows to me is that we've got a massive generation of people in the Western Church who are biblically illiterate, and they're not going to the scriptures and seeing if what is being said or what's happening in the church service is biblical. When you talk about the regulative principle of worship, this seems to be this is being assaulted in churches all over the place. I mean, we look at going on to another topic, but you look at Timothy Keller and ballet. The issue of ballet dancers
that's
in
on
a
the
worship
list too.
Service. Well, and it's just the regulative principle of worship is being assaulted all over the place, and it's because you have a generation of biblically or illiterate churchgoers who they're just not seeing if this stuff is what the scriptures clearly teach. And it's too bad because the pastors aren't pushing people to go to the Word of God. And so, with Nabeel, I know he started out in the Ravi Zacharias Ministries, RZIM. And I know that Ravi kind of brought him up. Now, Nabeel had a book that was published in 2014 called Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. I did not read the book. I know some people that did. And there was some very big issues even in his work, in that particular work, some very mystical stuff that causes some head scratching a little bit. And so, I don't know that I didn't follow Nabeel closely, so I don't know, theologically how sound he was or wasn't, but certainly where he went towards the end of his life. And you got to understand, I mean, obviously this is a man who he is desperate. He's got a serious ailment, and how scary is that at such a young age and having a young family? I can't imagine. But you have to put these things up against the Word of God, because if the Word of God is our ultimate authority, if we're saying that is the infallible rule of faith and practice, it's the infallible rule of faith and life, well then that's my highest authority, and I need to go to that first every single time.
There was other things as well. I just got the feeling, especially people who've been in contact with him and stuff like that, there was a reluctance in some to acknowledge the trajectory that Ravi Zacharias Ministries, for one, has been taking for years. I mean, a number of years ago, I did a program about Henry Nouwen, who was a Roman Catholic priest, who was I can't remember, was he homosexual or kind of he was a universalist, lots of weird stuff anyway. And he was saying that he was like one of the greatest saints of modern times. Very, very old show from years and years ago. And then there was this is 2016 now, so apologies, guys. This is going back a bit. But just the trajectory of Ravi Zacharias, and then you had Nabeel Qureshi on the stage and there was a video from Pope Francis about, if you watch the video, you think, okay, we're all brothers and sisters in Christ. There was even an ecumenical prayer from an Italian priest, an ecumenical priest during the whole service. I remember I was on, I think it was on Iron Sharpens Iron Radio about a year and a half ago. We were talking about this, and I didn't even even in my own program, I didn't get a chance to even talk about that. But there's a number of things. So there's been, usually this stuff never comes in a vacuum. Sometimes it might look like somebody falls publicly, but there's always been things in the background. That's why we've got to be very careful about our own private lives. We've got to make sure we're on our knees. We've got to make sure we don't have a secret stashed away life, and we're things that we've got to be careful about our own, and it's got to convict us. We got to say, we're not so great that we couldn't fall into sin. But the thing about it is, there has been a trajectory over the years with Nabeel and things like that. And this is not about necessarily Nabeel. It's not really, in some ways it's about Nabeel. But I think what we've got to do is we got to get away from personalities, because from a personality point of view, Nabeel, just looking at the videos and stuff, he looks like the nicest guy. He reminds me of best friends I had years ago and things like that.
Sure.
But we've got to go with the Word of God, and we've got to go with these things. Now, so that's Bethel Church, and pray for me. I'm hoping to do. There's a book. Where is it now? There's a lot of weird stuff around Bethel. Bethel, from what I can see, is extremely New Age as well. And there's a book that they put out a couple of years ago called. I'm just going to grab the book here. The Physics of Heaven. So I'm going through that at the moment. And in the first part, it's all talking about sound and sound, light, vibrations, frequencies, and quantum physics, getting to know God.
Yeah.
So it's extremely overt. I mean, his other books, extremely dangerous. Even the recent one, right?
Yeah.
Bill Johnson. I'm gonna have a bit of rant here. I'm sorry.
Go
Bill
for it,
Johnson.
brother. It's your show.
Yeah, I mean, Bill Johnson. He was on Michael Brown's show. Fantastic, wonderful Michael Brown. I mean, the only plus I can see from Michael Brown is he's an academic. He's got quite impressive credentials, things like that, which makes it worse because he should know better. And he's kind of been a gatekeeper for the charismatic movement for quite some time. But he had Bill Johnson on the program, talked about God is good. Now, I can't remember. I'm hoping that Michael Brown didn't read this book because there's a ton of heresies in this book. I'm trying to give Michael Brown the benefit of the doubt. And when there's lots of, you run a busy program, you might flick through a book and not really pay attention to it. That's what I'm hoping. But there's lots of things, basically God's sovereignty is basically denied in the book. Little quick quote here says God has desires that may or may not be fulfilled. Things like that. Right. Which is kind of where, sadly, a lot of this kind of doctrine goes. And what scares me about Bethel, right? You've got the extreme crazy, I try not to use that term because it's very flippantly thrown out there, but the extremely openly dangerous. Who's that guy again that kicked people in the head? Todd Bentley, wasn't it?
Todd Bentley, yes. Yeah.
I mean, Bill Johnson blessed him public on stage. Like, you are called by God, you're anointed, and all this kind of stuff. So, he obviously taught great things about him. Bill Johnson's from the same milieu, but he's been presented in a very acceptable way, shall we say, a way that is very... This is a kind of a normal, respectable teacher.
Right.
This scares me more than the Todd Bentleys. And everybody talks about Todd Bentley, but I don't tend to focus on that stuff so much because I think, really, you can't see this.
Right.
I don't know what I can do.
Well, and you talked about it before. With Bill Johnson, it is so. There's sort of that hidden. It's very deceptive in the sense, like, with somebody like Joel Osteen, you get what you see essentially. With Joel, he's pretty forward about who he is and what he believes, and what you see is what you
Die
get.
Trying should be the name of his ministry.
Exactly. But what you see is what you get. And with Bill Johnson, there is really a deceptive element there that
I think there's a deceptive element in Osteen's as well, just from a different angle. You might be new to Christianity. You might be around the fringes. I think there's still. I don't think you need to do it nearly as much.
Right.
Because Osteen is just from page 1. Boom. Here's what I believe. Seriously, read one of his books. You don't have to dig very far. But if you read one of Bill Johnson's books, not Physics of Heaven is a little bit different. Well, that's not a Bill Johnson book really, but it was he writes one or two of the chapters. You have to kind of keep reading until page 100. The first maybe one of those books you read, it's like, it's okay, it's not as bad as people. And then the shackles come off, and it's some chapter in the middle of the book, and it's like, whoa.
Oh, yeah.
It's, it sounds orthodox at the beginning. He knows how to sound orthodox, and then he's like, here's what I mean by this. It's not orthodox at all. So you've got to kind of, which kind of suggests to me that it might be a little bit deliberate, but, maybe I'm wrong there. And I printed off, it was last night, didn't get a chance to read through it, but BuzzFeed apparently sent somebody in there, and it even runs with one of the sub headlines: how a school that calls itself, quote, Christian Hogwarts, like Harry Potter, is upending a small city in California, Trump County. Anyway, so it's like calling Christian Hogwarts kind of says it all, really, but not too far off, except for the Christian part.
It's mystical, it's magical, it's something that's new and interesting to people, and that's a very scary, dangerous place when we're seeing things that are new and look fun. And we've talked about this before with the various interpretations there are out there, that all of a sudden, just there, after 2,000 years of everybody being wrong in church history, all of a sudden somebody today has got it right. And this flows into really a lot of things. I'm wondering if you'd like to talk about the shack, actually, because it kind of
topic number 2. We're spending a long time on this one.
Well, no, it kind of, it's again, it rolls.
Did you read
it?
Have you read the shack? Have you,
I did not
put yourself through that torture?
I did. I did not.
Oh man.
I have trouble getting through one book of the Puritans because my schedule's so busy. So, to read through, I'm like, the Shack or the Puritan Hope.
Can I be honest? It's very gripping, the first few chapters. When Missy dies, seriously, if you're a father, you're almost going,
oh,
I know this book is heretical. I've read some quotes beforehand, but why do I feel so bad for this guy? Seriously, I was reading through the book and I was going, okay, I feel horrible for him in the book. I get it. Mm-hmm. He's really pulling on your heartstrings. That's what sucks you in, that you're so invested in Mac's story. That's the main character for anybody who's never watched Shack. Right. And if you've never read The Shack or seen the movie, praise the Lord. Okay, so you don't need to change that, seriously. I mean, but anyway, so like, what do you think has been have you come across people? I've come across people here in Dublin. Well, I work in Dublin. I don't live in Dublin, but I've come across people in Ireland claiming to be Christians. Honestly, seriously. I mean, I've talked to people sometimes on the train. Oh, you're a Christian. I'm a Christian too. And you get into a conversation with them. After a while, you kind of going, "Are you really a Christian?" And you kind of start asking questions. And it's I remember one time I was having a conversation with a lady, and I was kind of pressing her with a few things about, I think it was about the Doctrine of Sin and a couple of other things in the Shack, and she sounded very mystical about it, and that concerned me greatly.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I've got we'll call them Facebook friends that
yeah, I don't know what to, sometimes like people say, oh, I'm fellowshipping on a Facebook forum. No, you're not. You're commenting. You're sorry.
I've got some, let's say, Facebook friends that have really praised that book, and it's really when they address the controversies surrounding it, the answer is, well, really, you're just making a big deal out of nothing. It's not that big of a deal.
It's just fiction.
Yeah,
it's just
exactly.
Fiction.
Well, but the problem is, it's not, because it's promoting something that is not a fictitious view. You go back to the what was it, 3rd, 4th century, the idea of modalism, right? And modalism really promoted this idea. And I think it's more like 3rd century, promoted this idea that God is really, it's one God, but he will present himself at different times as different persons of the Trinity. So sometimes God will be God the Father, sometimes God will be God the Son, sometimes God will be the Holy Spirit, but he presents himself at different times in different ways. So it's not really 3 persons, whose nature is God. It's not the idea of the Trinity at all. And this is really, this is sort of, the Shack is kind of a modern day form of modalism in a sense.
I call it like a semi-modalism. I don't think it's, I think it would annoy a modalist as well, and it should annoy a Trinitarian. But yeah.
Right. And exactly. So what you have really, even if it's in the, the under the umbrella of fiction, you're still assaulting the doctrine of the Trinity. It's a major assault.
It's not
on the doctrine.
It's not a cop out.
And you can't just say, it's not that big of a deal. It's fiction. Well, how big of a deal is the Word of God? How big of a deal is the doctrine of the Trinity? Because even if it's fiction, I mean, that should really grieve us that there is being an assault on the doctrine of the Trinity, fiction or not. It's terrible.
But even look, I mean, there's a companion work that was written by C. Baxter Kruger, which William Paul Young, he does, or also known as Paul Young, he does a foreword to the book, and he loves him and C. Baxter Kruger. They're almost like best friends. I don't know if they're falling out yet. There was a bit of a falling out between Paul Young and some of the publishers of the Shack. There was a bit of a lawsuit. They make it all sound like kumbaya, even though they're suing each other. That was in I think the LA Times back in 2010, 2011 over some of the rights. There was millions of dollars. Somebody wasn't getting some money somewhere. I didn't exactly follow up on the story because it didn't really lead into anything I was really talking about. But I mean, here's the thing, right? In that, he says, he talks out both sides of his mouth, unfortunately. This is Paul Young. He says in one place, it's not a systematic theology. And this is in the movie that I did. This is quoted in that. But he says, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was like, be not mistaken, it is a theology, but wrapped in human experience. So, like, he very much is, he's saying it's not a systematic theology, but he's saying there is theology being taught. But even if he didn't admit to that, it's still blasphemy. Now, this book came out this year. Okay, this is 2017 related. We're gonna keep on topic. Yay. Seriously, yeah. But I read this. Was this published? Yeah, this was published this year, because I get mixed up between years sometimes, because sometimes 2017. Yay. Yeah. All right. So this lays out exactly what he believes. And I remember I think it was Tim Challies did a review on this, and he was just, in his review, he was like, here it is. Here's exactly what Paul Young believes. But he tries to get out of it at the start, saying, this is just what I believe. You don't have to believe it, kind of stuff like that. I can't remember the exact thing he said at the start, but he tries to get out, not to get cornered, and here's my theology. I remember I was going to do another program a couple of months ago. I did, but just didn't get around to doing it. He did a Google talk, and in that talk, somebody it was a 10-minute clip. He was in a Q&A with somebody, and they were asking him about his view of hell and all this kind of stuff, and he just didn't want to cover it. He's not interested in that. He wants to talk about little. I'm kind of being facetious here. He wants to talk about Tiny Tim, who is who's asking, please, sir, can I have some more? He wants to give really heart-wrenching stories. He wants to lead your emotion. He's not interested in talking about the gospel. Not interested. And for somebody who's a Christian. There was another book that came out a couple of years ago as well, for people who want to research it. Burning Down the Shack, if people want to look it up. A guy who knew him from years ago, or at least claims to have, but there's nothing to say that he didn't. Came out a number of years ago. Whirling Daily put the book out, published it. And in it, he claims to, I should have grabbed the book actually, but in it, he claims to have known William Lane Craig. Sorry, not William Lane Craig. Before anybody quotes me on that, William Paul Young. Oh man, I'm gonna get letters. Anyway,
we can talk about William Lane Craig too. I mean,
doesn't matter what year it is. Anyway, but anyway, Burning Down the Shack. So anyway, he says that he knew him years ago. They had a little think tank together. They were talking theology and all that. And that years and years ago, I can't remember the exact year, but he had embraced Christian universalism. Sure. And he said that, according to him anyway, that there was an earlier draft of the Shack that had been made less universalistic. Now, but the thing about it is, in this book, Lies We Believe About God, he's not hiding anything anymore. Just to give you an idea of some of the stuff, I'm not going to give the quotations. I've done programs on this before. But he says sin is to deny who you are. Essentially, you're good, and to deny this is sin. That's William Paul Young. Yeah. This is in the Shack as well, though. It's not like, but that's not in the Shack. Okay, he's a heretic, but I like the book. It's in the Shack, okay? For anybody, what is the,
So yeah, it's a denial of original sin, essentially. It is right. We're talking about,
he is universalist.
We're talking about Pelagianism now.
He's universalist. So yeah, he might say, right, he says, right, that he's open. It depends what kind of question you ask him, but eventually everybody in hell or everything will eventually become into, he kind of gets
Right.
language around it, but eventually will be brought into Fellowship of God. Can't remember the exact terminology. He's a confusing guy, and you listen to him over and over, but he is consistent. He does redefine every single one of his terms, but that's the thing. I mean, he damages the gospel and all that. Let's get on to another topic. Beyond the Shack. It sounds like a movie.
Beyond the Shack.
Beyond the Shack.
It might be the sequel.
The
Beyond
rise
Shack.
of socialism and social justice warrior movement, if you want to call it that, or kind of SJWs as they're affectionately known on the internet, hashtag SJWs. What's it like? I know in Ireland there's a lot of the far left, for want of a better term.
Sure.
It's not the traditional left. I mean, I think the traditional left would have been, University of Berkeley maybe a couple of decades ago, talk about free speech.
Yeah.
The far left now is more Antifa beating you to a pulp because you voted for Donald Trump or something like that. What's it like in California? What's it like where you live? I know I've seen some things of, Berkeley's gone really, really bad, but what's it like in where you live?
I'm in Southern California, in just south of Los Angeles, in a county called Orange County, and everybody just knows it as Orange County now because it's a massive suburb of Los Angeles, and so it's become like its own metropolitan area, so to speak. Now, Orange County was classically, for years and years and years, very conservative. We have just, I think, in 2016, I think we are now, as of the 2016 election, we are probably about 40 to 45% Democrat, and then the remainder. I think only about 40%. I think the Republican and Democrat numbers. I think. Well, I think but that's a far cry from where it used to be. So I think the Democrat versus Republican numbers are about the same, and then the rest, 15-20% is
that's very
independent.
conservative for California in general.
Well, but compare it with 20 years ago. Orange County was extremely, extremely conservative. I mean, we're talking 20% Democrat versus 70% Republican. So massive shift. How long ago was California? Was it ever a red state? When was the last time it was a red state voted? Probably back. Well, see, here's the thing about California. California has gone back and forth between conservative and liberal governors. We've kind of bounced back and forth. Now we've had the Jesuit Jerry Brown for the past, what has it been, 6 years or something like that. And he's done his best to try and destroy this state even further. But I think probably the last time it was red, I may have been in the Reagan years.
Long ago.
Potentially George H.W., but it's been a long time. So, but you've seen certainly within the past year, 2017, the rise of social justice warriors. In my area in particular, I haven't seen much interruptions, but. Well, I should take that back. Recently, there was quite an interruption around Reformation Day, roughly end of October. A local college here hosted Milo Yiannopoulos, who I would have a lot of problems with. But,
me too.
But he is conservative, and so he was at a local college here in Orange County, actually just down the street from my own home. And
were there any riots or anything from that as well, or?
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on, and there was the authorities were really monitoring that closely, and so there's a little bit of that growing, but certainly up in the LA area, this is the state of everybody knows UC Berkeley. They're
Oh yeah.
Just they are the birth of this stuff. It seems
I
like,
think they've
but
even disinvited. Was it, am I right or wrong? I can't remember the exact university, but it was Richard Dawkins they disinvited, or am I thinking of another university? I don't know if you know anything about that. Was that you?
that
Was that
might have
Berkeley?
been Berkeley. That
Because I
might have
remember
been.
Richard Dawkins was saying, in an interview that that he loved Berkeley and all that, and it's like, wow, how it's changed. And I'm not a Dawkins fan, obviously, because of a lot of his views, but the fact that it's gotten so, man, it's just gone, and just anybody who's maybe lost and say, what's a social justice warrior? You're okay. You're actually you probably live in the normal world where you don't have to be on the internet all the time. But the thing, social justice warrior is basically just, I don't know, how would you describe it? Extremely far left, probably loves communism, may have different color hair,
Socialism.
who knows, but that's not really a definition. Or just generally, you will probably see them screaming and crying and throwing a tantrum after Hillary lost and Trump won the election. Thinks everything's racist, thinks everything's homophobic, is a professional victim, is looking for offense, is going to drive up offense at every single moment. It's kind of hard to define it because it is a new enough term.
If you're a white Christian male, you are a bigot by default, typically.
Yeah, there's no racism there, is there?
Yeah, and really, it's a very socialistic political position that they take, and I think you can take this back. If we go back to, and this is something I thought would be interesting, just kind of talk about the beginnings of this, and this is really a very Jesuit ideology here, this socialistic social justice warrior movement. You go all the way back, and we'll go back further in a second, but if you go back to the papal encyclical in the late 1800s from Pope Leo XIII, this was Rerum Novarum, and I know you've talked about this before on your program, Paul. But this was the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, really embracing, publicly embracing this idea of socialism, and it goes even farther back, though. A lot of people don't really know this. It goes even farther back to the 13th century with Thomas Aquinas. And Thomas Aquinas really was kind of the father of this socialistic thought. He was very much in favor of, hey, if your neighbor has something and you need it, and by the way, you're the one that determines the need.
Need is made of common.
Right, exactly. And so if you need it, you go take it. Go take it. And so this was very much Thomas Aquinas. This was, socialism. You really could kind of take all the way back to his thought.
And who knows how far Aquinas is going to take it. It starts off as a kind of an idea, an academic, and then you got the liberation theology guys taking it further. Then you have all this kind of other stuff. You can get a small, it's a hardback. It was printed. It was published back in the 50s or the 60s. You might be able to get it secondhand on Amazon if people want to research this further. His political writings have been all kind of put together. So if you just type in Thomas Aquinas, you don't have to read his whole Summa, which is really, really big. And,
right.
You'd have to spend a long time just studying through Aquinas, which is quite a feat by itself just to focus on that. But if you want to just look at his political writings that have been gathered together, he's got a French-sounding name, and the book's somewhere over there. But yeah, and like you were talking about Rerum Novarum. If you go back, I think it was Luigi Tapparelli who came up with the term social justice, coined the term. And if you go back even further, because I know people might say, Marx predate, Rerum Novarum, and he does it a little bit, but the Jesuits were developing kind of forms of communism in Paraguay, actually. Paraguay was essentially, if you read some old historical materials on Paraguay, it was basically kind of a police state. I have to do more research on this, but kind of they ran everything. And it looks like they still have a lot of power in South America to this day. I think one of the problems with Jesuit research, and we've talked about this back and forth, is the research has been so poor for decades, and it almost has to be redone. So you're gonna Google tonight, Jesuits exposed. You're gonna get. I'm sorry, but you're just gonna get some of the worst, unhinged research. Avoid it. One of the main guys.
If
I'm
it
not even gonna
says
tell the
Eric
guy's
John
name.
Phelps.
Yeah,
Sorry.
the guy is a white. Is he a white? Yeah, he's a white nationalist, and he's like Richard Spencer. He's not that far away from Richard Spencer. You know, Richard Spencer, the alt-right guy who wants to live in a country with only whites. Yeah, you know, nothing racist about that. But anyway,
yeah, you have to be very careful. You just Googling, you know, Jesuit conspiracy is really going to get you in a lot of trouble, because there's just not
I don't know
very
anybody.
much,
I can't think of anybody today. I mean,
No.
probably the best guy is Chris Pinto on this area. But I will just, with a word of caution, not about Chris, but just about so focused on conspiracies. I've made the mistake myself, right? When you're studying history, you've got to look at everything. You've got to look at the mundane. Most history is about 95% boring stuff, okay? And, you know, we always want to look at the exciting stuff. You know, what happened when that Pope was murdered in 1773 when they got rid of the Jesuits. We want to focus on that. But we need to study all of it in order to see it in context, because the problem is it's so easy to sow our own imagination and narrative into and create all sorts of things. And it's one of the reasons why the conspiracy community has been all over the place, and they don't agree with each other on a lot of things, except for things are really bad and there's a big monolithic entity trying to control us and all this kind of stuff.
Really the last great work on that was J.A. Wiley and his History of Protestantism, and you know, and he even has a little smaller booklet, I think, called the Jesuits' Moral Maxims Against Plots Against Kings, Nations, Churches, something like that.
It's the best one to get.
Read it. Yeah, it's really, really good. So if you want to look at now, obviously J.A. Wiley's work it's old. It's late 19th century, but it's the last greatest work I think that was done.
I don't think he's a difficult guy to read. I don't think he's a difficult.
No, not at all.
No, I mean, I don't want to scare people away. Like, he's much easier. Have you ever read Edmund Paris's book on the Jesuits?
No.
That's a difficult read. If it's a bit. Probably, and more because I'm not aware, you know, when I read it years ago, I wasn't aware of all the history around it. Chick Publications put it out years ago. And nothing, I don't know, you know, I don't know if it's a great book or not, because I have to double check it and everything. But if you want to get something, you know I see pastors sometimes, they just want to know something about the Jesuits, and there's been such poor research done on it. Get J.A. Wiley. It's a little, I don't know, it's about 100 pages. Seriously.
Yeah, it's a tiny thing.
And I don't think you need much more than that. I don't think, you know... I'm saying if there's good researchers out there, you know, have at it, but you've got to be extremely cautious, because there's from about the 50s and the 60s, it's been so poor. The last good book I can think of on the Jesuits was probably published in 1914. You know, and you know, with all the problems we have in the church, do I want to say to somebody, dedicate your whole life towards this one goal? No, back then it was one of the many topics they studied.
Oh yeah.
And you know,
and there was so much going on. It was so they were so extremely active, and I think, you know, I think the important takeaway right now for this is to know that, you know, I mean, the Jesuits are the largest order in the Roman Catholic Church. They're very, very liberal. They're very active in politics and stuff like that. That's for sure. But you know, they're very in line with, you know, anybody who thinks that, you know, the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, you know, they're so conservative, they're so wonderful Christian values. I mean, well, not really. I mean, there is a large push within the Roman Catholic Church towards liberalism, and so you know, and so and just to see the rise of this social justice, you know, it feels like the world's going crazy really with all of this. You know, it's absolutely insane to see how logic doesn't matter anymore, you know.
And I think here's one thing, and this is going to be hopefully a perfect segue into the next topic, closely related. The fact that Trump, by comparison, looks normal.
Yeah.
And, you know, people say conservative Christians don't have a problem with Trump. No, you've just put such a terrible megalomaniac like Hillary in front of everybody. So everybody's like,
Right.
anybody but Hillary. And
Right.
then it's like, Trump, okay. Ugh.
Yeah.
We'll vote for him because he's lesser of two evils. And now, I don't agree with even voting for him. I wouldn't even vote for him. But, I mean, I can understand why people would. And I don't think think that they're horrible fascists who hate Mexicans and all this kind of stuff, even though that was taken out of context and all this kind of stuff. And the Russia probe every 5 minutes, and and I don't know if you saw that hidden camera. There was I can't remember the name of the guy. I think it was Project Veritas. They had a kind of a hidden camera. They infiltrated CNN, took a job from them, and were talking to them in private. And they basically, on camera, just basically admitted the whole Russia thing was a whole nothing burger. That was the words. Can't remember the guy. Can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head.
Shapiro, or was it? No.
No. Ben Shapiro, no. Ben Shapiro was not on CNN.
You're talking about the guy on CNN that said
the guy in CNN. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I have to clarify that for people. We do not believe Ben Shapiro works in CNN.
It was my mistake. I was the one who misunderstood.
No,
okay.
I mean, like, the thing is, anyway, but like CNN's journalistic standards, I don't know how long ago I don't know when was the last journalist they've ever hired. Probably a couple of years ago. But like, did I send that article on to you? Just talk about why kids love fascist cartoons like Paw Patrol and Thomas. I never thought I'd be talking about Paw Patrol on my program. My kids get all kind of like, Paw Patrol. They're 3, by the way, and they're not fascists. Not that I know of.
Yeah.
I don't see them goose stepping around my hallway or anything, but
well, and I think that really what they see, like this article, you read through it, it's absolutely bananas. It's
I thought it was satire
nonsense,
for a while. I thought it was like,
gotcha. No, it's complete nonsense. But you see here that there is, it seems to be this such disdain for, because they talk a lot about. Well, let's read the very, very last line of the article, because I think it really sums this up really well. It says, quote, children would still get the satisfaction of immersing themselves in an orderly universe where rules are rules and everyone is in his or her place, just without the white guy on top. And really that sums up what this article is trying to get to, is the fact that, well, in these cartoons, it seems that, and I don't know how they get, I guess the white guys in charge from talking about trains, with Tom's the Train,
I mean,
because they're trains.
I mean, and I don't know a lot. I've never even seen Tom's Tank Engine, but it's a train.
Yeah, it's a train. It's a train. Well, and then the kid that's, the main kid in Paw Patrol is, a white boy. Okay, and he's in charge apparently of telling the dogs what to do, and so. They just.
But they had a huge problem with the fact that they called him Sir. Writers. They would say Writer, Sir.
Right.
And
that's right.
And the more I think about it, the more I actually like it now. After reading that, I kind of go, I would be like, oh, you want to? I try not to let him watch too much. It's on Netflix at the moment, but I'm just like, okay, watch an episode of here and there. And there is a sense of, okay, don't let your kids get addicted to videos. Maybe take maybe every now and again as a treat or something like that. But the fact that this is just show how bananas it's just gotten. Just a quote from me. Yeah, and he talks about writers being some kind of megalomaniac, and Sir Tophet Hat of Thomas isn't a neo-colonial autocrat. It's just. How can you write? Where is the editor in this?
Right. Well, it's just it's more amazing journalism coming out of CNN. They're so they do such fantastic stuff, and I say that obviously tongue in cheek, but I think you've really seen this blow up, and this is really kind of to headline our topic here about Trump's first year as president. I think you've really seen this kind of stuff grown in 2017 because of him, and the idea that America is full of neo-Nazi, racist white men. I mean, we just had 8 years of our first black president. I don't understand this. I think, you put, going back to Ben Shapiro, to give Ben Shapiro credit where credit is due, because I do really like listening to Ben Shapiro. I think he's got a fairly balanced view on this stuff, because he is very much for, he does his good Trump, bad Trump on his segments,
Which
and he
one
very
will
much
we
so
get
like
today?
Yeah, exactly. And so hey, credit where credit is due when Trump does something good, and let's call him out when he does something wrong. And so,
but the tax cut was a good thing. Let's say, bravo.
Yeah, and Trump's done a handful of good things over the past year. He's done a lot of bad things.
Yeah.
And usually I think Ben Shapiro is right. I think that it's it's his rhetoric that gets him in trouble. So
Twitter
when you're going on, and it's like I heard Shapiro say one time, if he would just get off Twitter, he's a very unpopular president. His numbers are pretty bad, so he is unpopular.
I don't know how unpopular it is. You might be right. I don't know. It's just the polling. I think Rasmussen and a couple of other ones are trustworthy, but there's been so many dodgy polls. I think he went down a really low number, which is 39%, which is too low. It's too early to go down that low and to recover. But apparently he recovered with the whole NFL thing.
Well, and see, here's the thing: when I guess when you're pandering to your base, you might be. See, the thing is, your base is your base, and that's always going to be always going to be your base. But the thing is when you see spikes in his approval ratings when he's just dealing with policy, when he's issuing policy, and he's the past 4 weeks of this past 4 weeks have been great for him in regards to policy. He's done some great things.
If he would just shut up and let the Democrats self-implode.
If he would stop getting in fights with LeVar Ball on Twitter, I mean, we can kind of, because that's the kind of stuff where people go, okay, just stop. And so I think that Ben gives a very good. Ben Shapiro
He's
gives
probably
a good
the most balanced commentator, because I've had my criticisms of Trump, but I just said, okay, he's gonna get in, and if he gets in, give him the benefit of the doubt and hope he does well. Like you should hope for any national leader, even if it's a liberal, get in there. Yeah. Hopefully, whatever. Pray for the man's soul, things like that. But I mean, it's like I've had my issues with him because of his claim to Christianity. He does not have a credible profession of faith. I put out a vlog a long time ago, and this was before at the time, I didn't think he was going to win the Republican nomination. This is back in, I think, 2015 or something like that, and maybe earlier. I don't know. Time seems to blur after a while. But looking at his, and everybody's trying to claim him as a Christian. We shouldn't be doing that. He doesn't have a credible profession of faith. It's not good for him. He's got a false hope, and it's not good for anybody else. And his brand of Christianity, that's the show I did earlier in the year. I don't want to be kind of doing shows in his policy. Once in a blue moon is fine. That's grand. Because I think that there's things to, we don't, just because we're Christians doesn't mean we check out of looking at the issues of the world. We're trying to look at them always through a biblical lens. There's nothing wrong with cutting taxes. That's actually a good thing. Things like that. But like I was in an earlier program, I think it was maybe January, February of this year, I did a program on his inaugural speech and just went through that. And his Christianity is the prosperity gospel. So whenever, and I see people, and I by the way, I like you people. If you know who you are, when I just say this, I actually like people. But I think they say, President Trump has got a Bible study or something like that. Yeah, but the thing about it is, he's been for decades. It isn't anything new. His pastor was Norman Vincent Peale. The power is positive thinking.
Yeah,
and this isn't anything new. I know people will say, he barely knows a Bible verse, but it's very much prosperity gospel. play lip service. It's not just something he did for the election. I don't think it's anything he just did for the election. He's always been like this. He believes, believe positive things. Norman Vincent Peale is, and Paula White now. I'll tell you all you need to know, really. The fact that she was, her and her Botox were doing the prayer. I mean, oh man, it's just, where do you start? But that's the religion. That's the religion of Trump. It's a false gospel. If we're going to say that, if we're going to get all annoyed, right, with prosperity gospel stuff, did anybody say anything? It's funny when it comes to national politics, and we should be saying, pray for America, pray for the blessing, pray that pray for the military, pray for all that kind of stuff. I hate the anti-American sentiment that goes around the world. You see, it's here in Ireland too. I hate that kind of stuff. But the rejection of that does not say we need to kind of go, yay, everything that Trump does, he's claimed to believe the Bible. We shouldn't believe George W. Bush's son didn't have a credible profession of faith either. I know a lot of people, a lot of Christians years ago, pastors, etc., would go, they really wanted to believe he was a Christian. Just basically, he said, I'm a Christian. That's it. And these people would have been Orthodox and everything else. They weren't liberals or anything like that, but they loved America so much. They wanted to have that claim to Christianity. But unfortunately, we got to be a bit more discerning than that.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned Paula White. Let's move on to another White. That would be James White.
I see what you did there.
And yes, exactly. I'd been thinking, just so you know, I'd been thinking about that for the past minute. How is going to roll into that? Just so you.
It's not just me that does that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So James White and the IFD. This was a big deal back in beginning of summer. And
Interfaith dialogue, for those listening, in case they don't know what IFD is.
Sorry, yes, the IFD Interfaith Dialogue. So, you had I think 5 different programs on that. You wrote a blog article. I wrote a blog article about it as well. And so, I mean, what are the issues that maybe we can just go over them again, and then I mean, how do you have dialogue with somebody of a different faith the proper way? I mean, how do you do that?
It has to be it can't be, here is a platform, teach what you believe without being refuted. We can't in any way, shape, or form encourage or give our thumbs up to it. Anything that blasphemes God, again, it's 2 John. And the thing is, and now it's been admitted like years ago, this passage is not talking about public preaching. It's talking about one-on-one even. If somebody goes to you in a coffee shop and talks about how great Allah is and all this kind of stuff, and you're just going there, that's very interesting. You violated what's in 2 John. I'll just read it out there. 2 John chapter 9, verses 9 and 10. Whosoever transgresseth and abideth not in the doctrine of Christ hath not God. He that abideth in the doctrine of Christ, he hath both the Father and the Son. If there come any unto you, and bring not this doctrine, receive him not into your house, neither bid him Godspeed. Now, and then it says, for he that biddeth him Godspeed is partaker of his evil deeds. This is not saying you can't have a conversation with somebody. That's ridiculous. But when you have that conversation with people, you make it quite clear, I vehemently disagree. Now, I know that they say, at the start, I hold my convictions, he holds his convictions. That's not enough. You can't just say, here's our view, here's your view, and put it on an equal pedestal.
Right.
And
that's the problem I think I have too with debates. That would be the issue I would have with debates.
At least with debates, that there's a disagreement, though. At least.
Right. Exactly. But there is kind of the feeling of, we're letting the audience kind of weigh out, which is the better argument. Now, you listen to James White, and he will tell you, I've heard him say, that he views his debates as evangelistic. It's an evangelistic tool for him. Okay, and that's why maybe with debates I'd have more grace with that. But what happened with him and the interfaith dialogue that he had with Yasser Qadhi It would have been better if it would have been a debate. But now Yasser Qadhi would not debate James White. He didn't want to. He didn't feel up to the task, and so. But he was up to having an interfaith dialogue, and now White agreed to this, and so now you've got And I
think White was asking for years, if I'm not mistaken now, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for many, many years, White has been contacting him. I think it was a dividing line from a couple of years ago that he actually, going back to old shows, that he was talking about this. And I think this is one of the reasons why his audience are a bit like, kind of like, what's the big deal? Because White has been talking about this for quite some time. So they've been kind of prepped for it. I think it's anybody outside of his audience is kind of going, whoa, stop, stop, like, because I think he does have a kind of a sect group who listens to him, and it just seems to be, I don't know, very tight knit or whatever the case is. But
he does. He does. I've listened to his dividing line several times, and there is clearly a group, because he does it. I think he does YouTube Live, I believe, and so there is a community chat board, and you can tell that he is very familiar with a lot of the people that are regulars in that community chat board, and so I think that, like you say, he preps. When you listen, he can prep stuff very, very well. I've listened to him, and you can go, it doesn't, it can make you kind of go, it doesn't sound like that big of a deal. But when you stand back, you look at it objectively. I mean, you had a Muslim imam brought into a church, a Christian church that has been dedicated to the Lord for the preaching of the gospel,
or even before God's people, or anybody for that matter.
Right.
Here you go. Right. Here's a teacher. Go teach.
Right. And you've allowed him to give his Islam theology. You've allowed him to teach it, or not necessarily teach it technically per se, but you've allowed him to at least speak his theology. And James White has contended that, well, he didn't speak his theology. But if that's the case, it's kind of like you said, and like I mentioned as well in my article. Yeah. Well, if he didn't speak his theology there, you didn't speak it the second night when you went to.
His major argument is this, right? And this is what he claimed. This is one of the reasons I didn't respond to him, because he clearly did not listen to the program that myself and Mark did. He called Mark Fitzpatrick Mark Carpenter at one point, and Rich tried to correct him during the program. He was screaming, "It's Mark Fitzpatrick!" And then James White was like, "No, it's not. I don't think you're right." But I digress. But the thing about it, the sad thing is, Mark had him in his house at one point. But anyway, here's his major argument. White's major argument: I preach the gospel. Okay, but he also claims that Yasser Qadhi didn't preach Islam. He's Islamic gospel. You can't have it both ways. They both had. Right. In the first night, I've watched both, by the way, in case people are wondering. On the first night, the second night wasn't great either, by the way. I had problems with the second night as well, but the first night was the major issue. The first night, because there was kind of prayers to Allah at the beginning, he was like, even just talking to Allah, he's like, praise be to Allah for this, and we I know you're just saying, oh well, he's just talking generally, but anyway, but we won't get into that here. His major argument is the gospel was presented on the second night, okay? And that on the first night, it was mainly Yasser Qadhi was allowed to speak. And then in the second night, it was mainly James White was allowed to speak, right? So therefore, right, if you're saying that they were given equal platforms and allowed to do equal things, you can't have it both ways. Either James White presented the gospel on the second night, which means Yasser Qadhi also preached the gospel according to Islam on the first night. If you want to say, no, he didn't, which is what he says, well, then you also say, according to the same standards, equal scales, as they might say in Islamic studies, the second night, he didn't do it either. So it crumbles away, and two wrongs don't make a right. Or, you can't just say, in order to preach the gospel, I need to sin. Exactly. I know other people have made the argument that he didn't preach the gospel. I can kind of understand it. I think it's a weak argument, to be honest. I think there was a presentation of the gospel on the second night, which was what really annoyed me, right? We said that over and over, myself and Mark Fitzpatrick, when we were talking in the program. James White goes on his program and says, well, Paul Flynn, Mark Fitzpatrick, ring in. You believe that the gospel wasn't presented. I believe, and I'm going to defend that. And I'm like, I never said that. And what were you listening to? So that's I don't get involved in that. People will send me videos of people responding to my program, and I'll listen to a couple minutes of it. And if it's so abundantly clear that they didn't even get, didn't bother, there's no point in responding to that. I've had a number of things over the years, and I just said it's just going to turn into something ugly. He said, she said. I'll say, here's my position. If people want to listen to it, great. If you don't, I can't do anything. I'm going to pray for you, but that's about it. And by God's grace, the truth will out.
And the thing is, I think what we need to kind of take away from this is there is a way to have those conversations properly. For example, if you're out handing out tracts or something like that, right, gospel tracts and whatnot, and you get a Muslim that approaches you and has genuine questions. I mean, genuine questions, and they want to know, well, yeah, what do you think? What do you think about this? So what do you think about? And they're genuinely wanting to know what you believe.
And we will ask them questions. And because we want to know what they believe in order that. But we're not going to say, hey, go teach the crowd. Go street preach while you're at it, so that everybody else knows what to refute about your Islam.
And exactly, and so you are having those conversations. You're being respectful. You're preaching the truth in love. You're being tactful. Yeah. You're doing those things. Now, obviously, if
you're
you
not
have somebody
screaming
who comes
in his
up
face,
with
Aisha, and Muhammad kind of arguments. You're not going, Muhammad was a pedophile or anything like that. I mean,
well, exactly, because then you're just gonna
there's a place for that. I think
they're gonna shut down. Yeah. And they're gonna shut down. But I think that if you get somebody who is not, who doesn't want to have a genuine conversation, who's being disrespectful, well, you just need to ignore them and move on, and you're not going to have a conversation with that person because they just want to argue. But you certainly, to your point, you do not encourage them in their satanic theology, and sadly, that's what James did the very first night. Towards the end of the dialogue on night one, he encouraged Yasser Qadhi to create material that could be distributed that would make it easier for us as Christians to understand what he believes. Is there something wrong with getting a general understanding of Islam so you could discuss it with a Muslim? No, there's nothing wrong, but I'm not going to encourage a Muslim to go and create materials,
and it's not even necessary
to spread his theology.
Yasser Qadhi's already written books. We already kind of know what they believe. Guys have published their books. It's not necessary. No, you might, for a project one-on-one, this would be fine as well. I want to know what you believe. I'm doing research for something. What do you believe about this? And you start taking down notes and everything else like that. I think at the end of it, you should kind of say, maybe after listening to the whole thing, I disagree with you. I think you need to know the Lord.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah. I thank you for your time, for sharing this. But at the same time, I'm putting it in a context where it's not like, hey, here are these two things side by side, and let's present them equally, as if they're equal. I mean, you don't see this anywhere in the scriptures. It'd be like Elijah saying, hey, priests of Baal, let's sit around and, hey, you present your theology, I'll present my theology, and we'll let the people decide. Didn't quite work out like that. But, the thing is, I mean, and you don't see that with Paul either. Yes, you see an exchange of ideas. I mean, because it wasn't his platform. Paul was, street preaching and all this kind of stuff, and it wasn't that they were in the church. I know people when they make the argument, oh, it's just a building and all that, but he didn't take his platform, whatever it was. Here's the platform. Right. I even think I don't think it'd be wrong. I know it'd be wrong. I teach English as a foreign language, and if I got one of my students to start going, hey, present before the class the gospel according to Islam. Okay.
Yeah.
If something like that comes up in class, right, and they do present, and I'll just say, okay, I disagree with that. Try not to get into a big massive debate in middle class because I'm the teacher, but try to be as respectful as possible. You know, you paid a lot of money to be here, but by the way,
Yeah.
you're, So I try to be as respectful as possible, but you do kind of lay out. You don't kind of here you go. You don't encourage. Now, do we, on a microcosm scale, we probably fail on this many, many times.
Sure.
But we're not talking about that. We're not talking about a slip of the tongue. We're not talking about somebody rang up his dividing line program and he made a mistake. I wouldn't even make an issue about that. Unfortunately, we mess up, myself included, many, many times. My problem is it's a premeditated, unrepentant act. It's not like, saying, you know what? If he had said this, right? Oh, you know what? I don't think that was a smart idea. Fine, we're done. Doesn't need to be discussed anymore. We're done. But my concern is he's doubled down and he's going to do it again.
Yeah, he's planning part 2. I just recently heard him say that. Yeah, he's planning part 2.
Yeah.
So I mean, with Yasser Qadhi.
That's where it's going to go. I mean, I don't plan to speak about it much because, oh man, I don't know if you've been on Twitter much. Oh, you have a Twitter account.
Yeah.
I don't. That's a quagmire, and I'm not going to get into it so much. But there's been so much damage been done to the anti-interfaith dialogue argument, right? That it has done far more damage to even just discussing it anymore, because it's just been bickering and petty, and I've contacted one or two people about, sometimes even publicly, and just like, can we just move on? And okay, my head will be removed at the end of it because it's like, you started it. I'm like, well, okay. So I mean, even if you're right, just say I am the most horrible person you're ever gonna meet. I'm a despicable person. You should never listen to me. Stop being petty. Right. Stop like trying to dig up dirt in everybody. And this isn't happening from just one person. There's several people involved in this, and it's just become so ugly. Like, and I'm gonna admit, like, to be honest, I remember. I'm gonna bring up one instance because I think I was wrong here. I think Justin Peters, for example, was treated really, really badly. I don't think he picked the right words to use, saying Islam wasn't a spiritual threat to the church, because that can be interpreted in a really, really bad way. I know what he's saying now. I remember I even retweeted the original video. But I've even said, he doesn't deserve this kind of, he seems like a really nice guy who's doing his best by God's grace. And if you're going to drag him in just because he doesn't line up with every single objection that we would have, that's crazy. Same with Mike Abramoff and all those other people. I mean, the fact that they're so solid on the gospel, they focus so much on the gospel in so many key areas. There's things like that. I mean, I don't want to get into it too much because I can see the potential, all this. I mean, we should all want peace at the end of this.
Sure.
We should all want, are we trying to win our brother to the truth? What we want is that white will just say, this is not right, repent of it, whatever, and just continue on. But I fear that it's there's a rocket launcher, a metaphorical one, in the arms of some, and just want to obliterate white's ministry. And I'm not his biggest fan or anything, but we shouldn't be getting into that, and it becomes really, really ugly.
Yeah, no, not at all. Yeah, because the thing is, I think I told you before, I think that 75% of what James White, does is really, really good stuff.
What's the rest of the 25?
Well, the IFD is a problem.
Yeah.
I think his view on textual criticism is problematic. I think that a recent guest of yours, Jeff Riddle, has done fantastic work at kind of refuting some of James White's stuff.
He's done a lot of great work.
I've listened to a lot of Jeff Riddle lately, and I really, really like a lot of stuff that he does.
And I like how he's very calm. He's very calm.
Very tactful.
I haven't dealt with the textual issue for years. mainly
Right.
because it's gotten so ugly, and I want to go back and study it again, right? Because there's a lot of stuff that I learned. I'll be honest now, I'm kind of like, is that actually true? So I'm actually, I want to go back to the topic. I want to study it through slowly. There's certain stuff like that I'm definite on, but there's a lot of mythology about the 17th century been peddled around, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, but with him, like, I mean, he's gracious. He doesn't attack
Very.
people. He's level-headed. He's a good guy to go to, and there's not many of them around. There hasn't been a scholarly defense of that position probably since maybe, Theodore Letus, people tell me, is good. I've never read Theodore Letus. I'm not recommending it. This is not a clip or somebody saying, you like Theodore Letus. I don't know. People tell me he's good. That's all I know.
Yeah.
But, Edward Hills is supposed to be very good. I'm redoing this research. I'm saying, hey, and I didn't always approach this in a very good way. I mean, look, back in 2010, I'm going to admit something that's really, really embarrassing. I used to read Gala Ripplinger. I'm sorry. But I read
your ministry is done.
I'm finished. I'm finished. It's like 2000. It doesn't matter. Oh man, you're finished. But I read the first book seems normal. It depends. It depends on what your knowledge is of certain things before you read it. But Hazardous Materials.
Yeah.
Basically, the premise of that book is lexicons are evil because the people who wrote them, basically the dictionaries, were atheists or Unitarians and all this, and didn't have all their doctrines. So anyway, I mean, let's be gracious towards people. We're studying this issue through, maybe by God's grace. I don't like, to be honest, people would have had, that preacher teaches from the ESV. I'm like, so?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people in the Reformed of the Reformed tradition that use ESV and stuff. It seems to be pretty popular. But I think, like you say, you've got to be gracious. Jeff does that really, really well, and I think that would be my last tick, I guess, against James White is the graciousness. There seems to be quite. I have a tough time with some of the. There's at least tends to be sometimes an appearance of ego, and I don't, I have a tough time with that. And maybe James White is a very kind, gracious. I've listened to some of his stuff, and he sounds like he might be. It's just that sometimes when there is somebody who takes issue with some of the stuff he does, he can approach it a bit harshly, and I guess it can come off. It can come off rough sometimes, I suppose. So, but
and I've said that before as well in the program as well, and other people have said it, which would bring us on to our next topic. I mean, we're going to skip a few things here. Kind of, there was the Houston free will debate that took place. When was that? Was that about 2 or 3 months ago? Which I think we both agree was I'm going to say train wreck. Don't put words in your mouth.
Train wreck.
About
100%.
And which kind of coincided with kind of Pulpit and Pen becoming, Pulpit and Pen, J.D. Hall becoming more erratic.
Right. Yeah, and I thought that, what's funny is going back to James White for a second. I thought James White's he actually critiqued Houston free will debate. I listened to his critiques,
and I agreed with a lot of it. What he said,
he did a great job. And I listened to the debates.
It's kind of like good white, bad white. Which one? We
exactly.
agree. When I agree with them, fine. I agreed with not everything he said. Of course, there was some. Constantly comparing himself with his own debating skills, maybe not. But seriously, there were problems with the debate, and I think I listened through not all of his programs, but most of them, and kind of go, I think it was dead on.
And after listening to the Houston free will debate, I mean, there was so much lack of grace in all of that, and really, you had the where things really fell apart, really, I think, was during the Q&A, because at the beginning you had the individual speakers that went through. You have Leighton Flowers, and you had was the other.
Who do you think was the best guy of the four? I'll give you my opinion, and after that, you probably know my opinion.
It was the first Leighton Flowers partner. I forget what his name
Pritchett.
was.
I agree. He was the best speaker.
Josh?
I don't even
Justin or Josh?
and he was the Arminian side.
Yeah. No, he presented his side. I think he presented himself the best. Theodore Zachariades was just I thought he was over the top. I mean, he was.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with passion, right? You got being passionate, talking about that. I'm 100% fine. But there was just a massive lack of tact and grace in the way that he presented his own position. But then in the Q&A at the end, that was where it really went.
I found it very hard to watch. It was
very hard.
You know what? There's bad debates all over the internet, right? And I don't even comment on them or anything. And I probably wouldn't have commented on this except for, well, Pulpit Pen are like kind of going, "Oh, this is amazing! This is the best thing ever." I'm like, "What were you watching?"
No.
I'm sorry, but you know, I'm not even saying I would do a better job. I don't know. Maybe I would be a train wreck if I went on a debate. I don't know. I've never done debating. A friend of mine, Mark Fitzpatrick, has been on the program. I don't know what it is about him, but he's actually very, very good at laying out arguments. He's just very, very good at it. He was on a debate on Revelation TV on the charismatic issue. Some people just have a knack for it, and just some people just can't do it. And I don't know which one I am. I have no clue. None whatsoever.
Oh, I know for a fact I would be terrible. I would be terrible at debate.
Let's debate how bad we are.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's debate how bad. No, because here's the thing. There is when it comes to that, I mean, certainly having your ducks in the row in a row as far as what you know and your knowledge of a particular subject is huge, but also to have the wittiness and the being able to think quickly on your feet. Yeah. He just said this, so okay. I know exactly where I need to go in the scripture to talk about it. So to whereas I'm more of a guy that I process things slower.
But I think that comes with experience as well.
Something. Yeah. Indeed.
Because if it's your first debate, it might be rough, but you might be very, very good at it. But I think there can be an over reliance. I'm not anti-debate, but here's my view about debate. I think debates should be used sparingly, and I think debates should be used within the professing visible church. I don't think I'm not a big fan of the false religion versus. I like during the Reformation, there's a debate that Flavel had with a 1689 Baptist. At the back of his works or something. I have to go through and read it.
So Flavel was wrong?
No, he was right. But you know what I mean? These things happened and they were a blessing to the church and all that. Now, you probably go, "Oh, Martin Luther debated." Yeah, because it was like, it's a bit anachronistic to kind of compare them, because back then, I still saw Rome as a body still as part of the visible church. Now, they were cut off at Trent, just so anybody doesn't think that I think Rome is a true church or anything like that. They formally anathematized the gospel. They were apostate by that point, by the way. Because I think it's a good idea to maybe debate liberal churches on certain issues. I don't know, maybe female ministers, something like that. Maybe it'll jive with somebody. Maybe not so obvious as that, but maybe kind of maybe eschatology. That would be a great debate topic. There's things like that. I'm not even saying that I'd be very good at it or anything like that, but they're good things to maybe have debates in-house about and try and do so respectfully, But one major problem I had was the Q&A. The Q&As, when there's just like, I was just like, man, I had to put it on 1.5 times just to get through it as fast as possible. I just it was really weird. Like, I mean, it started off, Pritchett was the best speaker. Leighton Flowers does what Leighton Flowers always does.
Always.
He grandstands, he kind of a
lot of caricatures, a lot of straw men, a lot of that stuff.
I say he virtue signals a lot, because he kind of goes, we're trying to understand the other person's side, but then he uses the same caricatures of
yeah. And that's the problem is he's not, because the thing is that, Leighton's been in debates with James White before. I mean, he has been corrected over and over and over again on his caricatures, but he uses the same argument over and over and over again. So
if you and I mean, I've listened to a number of his podcasts, and I know he's responded to me a few times. He did a whole 3-hour debate, actually, I think, on one of my programs or something like that.
yeah,
But the thing about it is, it's like, it just becomes so repetitive. I'm just like, okay, that's not what I said. And do we need to go back over that again and again and again?
yeah.
You know, it might get listens and it might get people eyeballs and all that, but I don't think it's going to bless anybody. I just think it's, you know, if people want to go towards the original presentation. I mean, if I ever respond to McGann, it'll probably be to his book. If I get a hold of his book at some stage, because the problem is, for me, when he's talking, he's like a moving target. You just like going, it's very hard to nail him down on what he actually believes about certain things, so what to refute him on and stuff like that. But I digress. And then he comes up with these arguments about there's different types of Calvinists and all this. There's 4-point Calvinists. No, that's Amyralianism. That's something else. You could even say J.C. Ryle wasn't the Calvinist, but, you know, because he didn't believe in the third point of atonement. That's Amyralianism. That was a later departure. Now, there's been some good Amyralians in church history, but if you want to talk about what Calvinism is, you know, it doesn't even have to be John Calvin. Westminster Confession of Faith, 1689, London Baptist Confession of Faith, or the Savoy Declaration. They're the best expressions of it. Anyway, or the
the three forms of unity. Yeah, three forms of unity.
The tulip. You don't whether you're superlapsarian or infralapsarian, it doesn't change the tulip one jot. And when people say that, it's like, you were a Calvinist for 10 years and you don't know that. But anyway, it gets kind of frustrating after a while.
I think that what kind of came through, certainly from Beza's, Beza. I was thinking Theodore Beza. Woo! Theodore Zacharades.
Yeah.
Wow. No, he is not Theodore Beza. No, I
thought you were going to start talking about superlapsarianism. That's what I thought you were going to talk about.
I don't want to even touch that conversation.
No, I know. I don't talk to people about it. I kind of go, you know what? I've changed my view about 5 different times, probably in the car ride over to church.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, no, from Zacharades, what you saw, certainly from him, and I think also maybe from Hernandez, is I think you saw two men who are, I think, dangerously close to hyper-Calvinism. When you can't articulate the difference between free will and free agency, and you just say, well, the Bible doesn't teach we don't believe in free will. We don't believe in free will. We don't believe in free will. The Bible doesn't teach free will, so that's it. We're done with the conversation.
The response was a little bit fundamentalist, and I know people hate hearing that term, but when I was in fundamentalist circles, there was no explanation of why this was so. That's what I mean by fundamentalism. Is there anything wrong with the 5 fundamentals of the faith and the historic movement? No. However, what I'm talking about is, what you think about is like, that's what we believe. The Bible says that. And that, okay, can we explain it? Can we let us reason together, saith the Lord? Can we use our minds? It can't be an intellectual thing. There was no explanation. There was no kind of developing the idea further. Now, I don't know. I'm going to try and give them the benefit of the doubt whether that's just they don't know how to explain it, or they are fairly hyper-Calvinistic. I know I've seen them quote people. I don't think they are. I don't think that they are hyper-Calvinists. I just think they're leaning in that direction. Now, you could say, well, where's the line and all this? I don't think that they deny the free offer, or that they're like denying. Maybe they do. I don't know. The well-meant offer. It becomes, when you start conflating free will in the sense of how do you get it, like the possibility to choose A and B over the ability to choose the good or cooperate in salvation. When you conflate those two together, when you don't believe that there's any, like, that Adam had free will prior to the fall. Now, certain people believe that as well, which is a problematic view, if you ask me. What happened in the fall? If there was no free will before, well, what happened after? Becomes a bit, you're kind of flattening out the covenants there a little bit. But you can have areas in these places and not be that theologically off, but they can have consequences, and I don't know. I guess I want to be gracious because I'll be honest, I don't know. I haven't looked at other debates from these guys. Here's what concerns me, right? What concerns me is they're giving each other pats in the back. They're constantly back and forth with James White, even though I think James White is right on this issue. And they're giving each other pats in the back. I think maybe they had a massive off night and they need to go back, dust themselves off, and go back to the drawing board before they start going, yeah, this is fantastic. Because what I don't want is that this is the expression of Calvinism for the millennials or the young people or whatever.
I'll tell you what else is troubling is in one of, James White had refuted. He gave his critique of the debate, and then both Zachariades and Sonny Hernandez had offered rebuttals to James White. Well, in Sonny Hernandez's rebuttal, he makes the distinction between a moderate Calvinist and what he calls a Dortian Calvinist. and this is concerning to me because here's the thing is what the definition essentially that he was somewhat offering here was that it sounded a bit like a Dortian Calvinist was ready to point out when somebody's is or isn't a believer. Well, that person's definitely saved and that person's not. A moderate Calvinist, which apparently guys like you and me and James White would be, are guys who are not ready to, who are saying, there's some issues with your theology, but hey, I'm not ready to look at you and say, you're definitely not saved.
Like I've always said, right, a consistent Arminian when I was dealing with the Arminians before, because I agree with Top Lady that it is a road to Rome. It is. I think a consistent Arminian, hear me now when people are listening, is lost. But most Arminians, like I was are inconsistent because they'll say it's all of grace, right? Yeah. They believe savingly on Jesus Christ. They've been born again. They've been regenerate. They're producing fruits. They're a new creature in Christ Jesus, and they're studying through things like election. Not usually straight away. I can't remember, was it Whitfield said this? We need to graduate from, the high school of faith and repentance before we can go to the university of election and predestination. And some of these people want the gospel to be, what do you believe about election? That becomes something else entirely.
Yeah, and I think that, gosh, I lost my train of thought. I was thinking
happens to me all the time.
We're
an hour and a half into this.
You got so much stuff just
remember I said to bring coffee?
I know. Well, it's midday for me still. So,
oh man.
But yeah. So I think that when you get to the point where you're trying to make judgment calls on where a person stands. If it's somebody that's got a credible profession of faith, right? And I think you're right. A consistent Arminianist, I would say, would not have a credible profession of faith because there are major doctrines that are being violated there. And
it concerns me how Flowers is trying to. He's studying it so much. He starts off with free will. Man must have free will. And he's trying to get it in there so much. Yeah. His views concern me far more than Pritchett. I don't think Pritchett has, as much. But I'm trying to give the benefit of the doubt. I think at this moment in time, I think they're both my brothers in Christ.
Well, and I personally don't know a consistent Arminius. I mean, all the Arminians I know actually are, I would say, they're inconsistent. They're inconsistent Arminians who
Jesse Morrell maybe
would say that's. Oh well, I'm saying personally,
personally,
people that I know, I personally know. I'm sure there's plenty of them out there. Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I think even Top Lady said this. Like that. A consistent Arminian. I think he might have said this in his history that he wrote on Calvinism, that a consistent Arminian is a Pelagian.
Right.
But I don't have any problem with that. Would I call... See, Arminianism, yeah, I see it as a heresy. I see it as a departure from the truth. But how do you understand that? And most people don't even understand the issues.
Right.
What are you going to say for the first couple of hundred years of the church? Did they understand the issue? And a lot of times they didn't. They were very inconsistent. Now, if you wanted to put them one side or the other, they were very Calvinistic. There was a lot of quotes from Ignatius. Like, you could easily prove that total depravity, total inability was taught in the first few centuries of the church. Easy. But you can also see some kind of inconsistencies there with talking about man's free will and stuff like that at times. But they talked about predestination, talked about in God's hands. Were they inconsistent? Of course they were. Augustine, the doctrine of grace, the great doctor of grace, as he was known as, he was inconsistent with his view of grace, with his view of the sacraments. Okay, yeah, and unfortunately, his doctrine of the church, it was the doctrine of the day. He just kind of inherited it. And he wasn't really debating about it in a It was just everybody believed. Unfortunately, I'm not giving him a pass, but you've got to be a bit more gracious in such a situation. And B.B. Warfield said that the Reformation was the victory of Augustine's doctrine of grace over his doctrine of the church. So his doctrine of the church went away. So there's going to be errors. Are we going to say there was nobody saved up until Martin Luther, John Calvin? And I think, like, you say, where were the Calvinists before John Calvin? Read Bondage of the Will by Martin Luther. There you go.
Yeah, well, Wycliffe. I mean, guys like this that the more, but and this really rolls into maybe another topic here, because I think that there's core things that have to be in place, and when I think of that, I think of the five sola, going kind of in honor of the 500 year of the Reformation. You look at what was the Reformation about? What were they doing? I mean, you are. What came out of the Reformation were these core doctrines of sola scriptura, sola fide, sola gratia, solus Christus, soli Deo gloria. Right? You had the five solas, and it was that Scripture alone teaches that salvation is by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone, to the glory of God alone. And at the time, you had the church, you had the Catholic Church saying, well, that plus this other stuff. See, it's not just Scripture alone; it's Scripture plus our tradition, and it's not just grace alone; it's grace plus merit, and it's not just faith alone; it's faith plus works, and it's not just in Christ alone; it's Christ plus the co-mediatrix of Mary, right? So you had these things that the Catholic Church was adding, and the Reformers are going back saying, no, this is the core of what the gospel teaches, and out of that you have the doctrine of justification, which was huge, and when you had the Reformers saying that a man is justified by faith and faith alone, you've got the Counter Reformation going on with the Roman Catholic Church, going to Trent in the Council of Trent in the sixth session of the Council of Trent on the doctrine of justification. They're anathematizing the very things that the Reformers, well, not just the Reformers were saying, but what Scripture taught, right?
Yeah. Sixth session on justification. If you want proof that Rome doesn't believe the gospel, well, the first two canons are biblical. Actually, they condemn Pelagianism, but then after that, it's condemning Calvinistic doctrines, condemning justification by faith alone, and that would bring us into that recent news. Well, recent enough, I suppose, with John Piper and that whole controversy. But I suppose you could call it the final salvation controversy, because what he was teaching, and I suppose for more context, you'd have to go back. We talked about it in your program a little bit, and I did some programs on that as well, and I did an article for the McGiddo Review, that he believes that, he says justification is the beginning part. In order to get in, it's by faith alone. But, E.P. Sanders, who's one of the founding fathers, you could say, of the New Perspective on Paul movement, he also believed this. It's get in by faith alone, but to stay in, it's faith and works. And then you've got and there's different terminology they use. They'll either say final justification. Piper does not use the term final justification. This is what throws a lot of people off. He says, well, he's not talking about justification. He says it's about salvation, which can include works. And that's true. You know, like you can say salvation includes justification, sanctification, everything. But the problem is he's saying in order to enter into heaven for salvation, for final salvation, it's faith plus works. And faith plus works is oil and water. They don't mix. Faith and faith alone is the causal instrument of our salvation. That does not change, right? But there are other things that necessarily follow. Good works necessarily follow. When the Reformers talk about works being necessary to salvation, not for salvation, but to salvation, there's a big difference. It's talking about causal. You know, by faith alone is the causal condition. The antecedent. The Reformers were very, very careful. The thing is with Piper, he's not. He's just throwing stuff out there on Twitter and everything else, and other people work at desiring God. But there's faith and faith alone is the causal condition. The antecedent condition sometimes is used by some of the Reformers, guys like John Ball. And then if you want to make sure that you do not go down that horrible route of antinomianism, you could say that there's an consequential condition to the covenant of grace. Do this and live. If you keep my commandments, things like that. That is on the road to, you know, like on the way, okay? But that is evidence. If you're confused about this, stick with the Westminster Confession of Faith Catechism or any of the Baptist catechisms and things like that. But it is an evidence. It is not a causal condition. It is, and then if you're talking about works are declarative. They show before man that you are truly saved. Now, sometimes we don't know. There's a Judas, and he may look outwardly like he's actually a born-again believer. There's always tares among the wheat, okay?
Sure.
But if you don't have any fruit, you've never been born again in the first place. That's the whole point. And often there were... there's lots of things you could get into, but his point is faith and works are necessary for final salvation. And to attain, he was even back in 2015. He wrote a foreword for what was his name again? Robert Schreiner, was that his name? He wrote a book called Faith Alone. Anyway, it's in the article on Megiddo Review, and in that he talks about attaining faith and works. Faith alone is not necessary to attain salvation. It's a bit concerning then with the defense by Mark Jones. And Mark Jones, from what I can see, is a very able theologian. I don't know a ton about him except for he co-wrote that great book, and it's an excellent book, Puritan Theology, with Joel Beakey. And Joel Beakey, I think, is one of the most gifted writers the church has been blessed with in recent times. One of my favorite recent authors. So I don't have... that we need to be so careful. There's no room for changing on the doctrine of justification.
Yeah.
And when we can, if people redefine as final salvation, we should be really concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, like we talked about on my program too, the idea that justification and sanctification they're connected, but they are distinct. And when you're trying to put them together, when you're trying to say, well, sanctification is justification, well, then we have a problem. But to your point about, salvation, there is a process to salvation. I'm reminded here of Romans chapter 8, verse 30, where it says, moreover, and this really is the process of salvation. Moreover, whom he did predestinate, them he also called, and whom he called, them he also justified, and whom he justified, them he also glorified. Right. So there's a process to salvation. You're elected, you're called, you're justified, you're sanctified, you're glorified, and that is the entire process of the salvation process. But it's not the justified. It's an act in and of itself. It stands alone, but yet it is, like you say, connected to sanctification, because when we're justified, well, then works will follow as proof of that, and we will be sanctified. And the sanctification process is being more and more made like Christ, and that's going to continue to the day we die.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we got to be very careful when we could say quoting from. It's gonna get really low on me there all of a sudden. When we're quoting from the Puritans, read their entire book. It's just so easy today with technology and the PDFs and all this, and people could come up with these great quotes, look like they know what they're talking about, and not so much. Be patient. If somebody quotes from an obscure book to prove, in this situation, now, this isn't our final authority, like the Bible is, but the confessions, okay?
Yeah.
It can't be William Tweed said this, who was a Westminster Divine, or Peter Van Maastricht, or whoever else it is.
Right.
Why? Because they're talking in great detail. Any of the reformers could be taken out of context.
All it is, if you just put up one little blurb. I mean, I think I saw on Twitter someone who was trying to defend John Piper posted a quote from Herman Witsius. Now, Herman Witsius, because Herman Witsius has plenty of writings where he would be upholding the doctrine of justification by faith alone. But it's easy to take this one quote. Well, you have no idea what the context is. Yeah. It's one sentence.
And it could be quoting somebody else.
Right.
They would do that for pages. The Puritans would page after page after page, and you have to remind yourself, he doesn't believe this.
Yeah.
He's just presenting the other view, which may take 10 pages sometimes. Read John Owen. Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah. I remember you when you read through, when you've read through some like a history of Protestantism with Wiley, he goes on and on quoting something for pages, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's right. This is not him talking. He's still, quoting something, So
it's so easy. Now, it's a lot harder to do it today, because why? Because we explain, we don't give, I suppose, maybe we explain it to death because we're afraid of being taken out of context and stuff like that. But whatever the case is, I mean, be patient with the Puritans. Don't go, look at this vlog, John Calvin, he didn't even believe Revelation was in the Bible or something like that because he didn't write a commentary on it. Well, maybe because he died before he had a chance to.
Yeah.
Give him the benefit of the doubt.
50s, right?
22 volumes. He died when he was in his 50s. And, when I hear all these accusations against reformers, cut the guy some slack. How much would you have written by the time you're in your 50s?
Yeah, you think of how much he produced in 30, 35 years of writing, I mean, he produced a lot of material to go through the entire Bible, and commentary on it.
He didn't finish Ezekiel. He didn't do 2nd and 3rd John, I think, and Revelation, but I don't know. I can't find it in any history, but I think it's basically because he died. He died at 55. Yeah. He died with a lot of stuff. Praise the Lord, he actually, he got because there was a couple of different editions of the Institutes. I was about to say Institutes of Technology, Institutes of the Christian Religion.
Well, and speaking, this brings me to another thought of the passing of great men. I just want to say something real quick about R.C. Sproul, and because this is something that just happened recently. I know you haven't. I don't think you've read a lot of R.C. Sproul, or maybe none.
I'll be honest.
I've
read nothing. I bought his book. I have it on my shelf, Faith Alone. But I'm not going to say, R.C.'s the great. You know what? I've heard a lot of his talks. He seems great. He's made some great points, and I'm like, I got to read this guy. But I'm not going to come out here and say I've read all. Anything. I haven't read. I've just one of those guys you just don't get around to reading. Sadly, until he passes away. But you've read his. What was the book? What is Reformed Theology, isn't it?
Yeah, what is Reformed Theology? This book for me was pivotal, and just to kind of give a brief summary of kind of my coming to Reformed Theology, I was very dispensational, grew up dispensational. in inconsistent Arminius churches, definitely believe that salvation was all of God and all of grace, but very inconsistent. And it wasn't until I had some good Reformed brothers in the Lord who had challenged me, because I was the typical, spitting out all the caricatures and all the straw men and all that stuff. Over and over. And I had some brothers in the Lord who, because I was constantly saying, well, this guy says this about Calvinism, this guy says this about Calvinism. And I finally had some good brothers who said, you know what, Brandon, instead of reading and learning about what Calvinism is from guys who, are anti-Calvinists, guys who dislike Reformed theology, why don't you read what the Reformers say? Read the Reformed guys.
It's a novel idea, isn't it, for a lot of people?
Yeah,
Myself
exactly. And it wasn't until I had one of these brothers who said to me, after an evening of a couple hour long conversation of going back and forth, he said, Brandon, if Calvinism was what you thought it is, I wouldn't be a Calvinist either. And I thought, okay, well, maybe this guy's got a point. Maybe, okay, so I finally said, all right, let me set aside my presuppositions for a minute. Let me, these brothers have a point. Let me, if I'm going to talk about Reformed theology, I should at least read it from the Reformers and know what they say and try to have an objective perspective here. My intention was to read Reformed theology, read what the Reformed guys said, so that I could better debate it. So I could say, hey, I've read your guys' stuff.
I did the same thing, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so,
look, reading through Calvin's Institutes looking for dirt, and that was me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in the first book, the first book I picked up, because I wasn't going to read Calvin, because I was convinced that he was a heretic who just liked to kill people, like Michael Servetus and all that stuff, right? So
yeah,
and so
it's like an equivalent to what CNN is doing with Trump. Although at least Calvin was a genuinely godly man, but it's kind of akin to that. They've gone over the. It's not like he had a few faults here and there. You might want to. No, he destroyed everybody in his way. And I'm like, whoa, okay, now I might check your claims just a little bit, because it just sounds a little bit far fetched. Especially when John Knox went there and thought, it was a perfect school of Christ. You get the same people who love John Knox, right? They think John Knox is amazing, and John Knox thought John Calvin was amazing, but John Calvin was this horrible tyrant. But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But no, and so I knew the only modern guy, Reform guy I really knew at that point I did know R.C. Sproul, and he had a book called What is Reformed Theology, and I thought, all right, I'll start here. And just to give a quick overview, I mean, the headings of the chapters, from starting at chapter 1, centered on God, based on God's word alone, committed to faith alone, devoted to the prophet, priest, and king, the threefold office of Christ, covenant theology, the five points of Reformed theology, the doctrines of grace, and then he goes through, the different, each chapter for each of the doctrines of grace. And so as I read through What is Reformed Theology by R.C. Sproul, I started going, I don't disagree with that. Okay, yeah, no, he's right. The scriptures do say this. Okay, well, yeah, I agree with them on that. And by the time I got to the end of the book, I was a Calvinist. And I said, the more I dug into it, the more I go, I'm seeing, oh my gosh, this is the word of God. This is what the scriptures clearly teach. And I still, I
might be right, but I might be wrong. But didn't he lead John MacArthur to being a Calvinist as well? I think I might be wrong on that.
He might have. I don't know.
I know he was great. I know he was a great blessing to him and everything else, and they were very close friends. But I think I mean, I think he might have been the reason he became a Calvinist, because I think he came from an Arminian background. I'm not too sure, but see if we can look into
Yeah,
that.
he might have, and I haven't actually I haven't researched MacArthur's story, but I do know that he was a big influence in a lot of ways, and that they were very good friends. But Sproul's book was pivotal for me. That was the point in which I finally opened up and said, okay, I think I've got it wronged about this Reformed theology stuff. I think I might be Reformed, and
it's like coming out of the closet or something.
Yeah, exactly. But
yeah,
but and I think the last thing, because I still had, even after Sproul's book, I think I was 100%. I was like 90% on everything. I think the last domino to fall for me in regarding to the doctrines of grace was the
third point, was it like limited atonement?
No,
Irresistible
that one was
grace.
Irresistible grace.
That was like me as well.
Irresistible grace. And what the light bulb that finally went off for me on that was I had a mentor. This was really a blessing too. After reading Dr. Sproul's book, I had a mentor in my church who was kind of just with me, throughout my process of coming to an understanding of Reformed theology. And he sent me a series of lectures done by Dr. Steve Lawson, who has church, I think, in Georgia or Alabama.
Somewhere in
remember,
Alabama, I think, yeah.
Alabama. And I remember it was in these lectures, he was, Dr. Lawson was hitting, he was doing a lecture on every point of every doctrine of grace. And when he got to the irresistible grace, there was one thing I never forget it, because this is when I was finally like, oh yeah, I'm 100% on board all the way. Yeah, baby,
on the
baby,
train.
let's go. Yep. I'll never forget it. But he said, he was talking about monergism versus synergism. And is salvation a monergistic act on the part of God, or is it synergistic? Do God and man work together to bring about man's salvation? And he said, if you believe that it is a synergistic act, that God and man must work together to bring about man's salvation, that man must contribute faith, then what you are saying is that God cannot, I repeat, cannot save you without your permission.
Yep.
And I go,
could you imagine?
I want to back away from that one.
Could you imagine a doctor, and the patient, and the patient's unconscious, and the doctor needs the permission.
I need his permission.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna just let him die. And the thing is, the analogy is not even a perfect analogy. The analogy would be the patient's dead. He's a Lazarus. Right. He is a stenching corpse. And you want Lazarus to give you permission? Not going to happen.
Yeah. And so that was when it just, kind of the mind blown meme, or whatever, the mind blown emoji.
But it was the same for me. When I read, I think it was to the end of book 2. It's been a number of years ago since I read book 2 of the Institutes. But I remember, I think he was talking about irresistible grace at the end of it. Like, he wasn't, like, people have to realize, right, there was no tulip, boom, 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 back then. This was just aspects of the gospel he was going through.
This is exactly. And this is just the word of God.
And then he talked about things to do with grace, and then grace is not just dispensed cheaply. And, basically, if God, if you're you are converted, basically. And I remember reading that going, I don't know if I agree with that. And, I said, that's the only point I disagree with. But eventually, I can't remember the exact time, but it was just like, that was the final domino for me to fall. One of the first things for me to fall was, limited atonement. That made
that was easy for me.
Makes logical
100%.
sense. I mean, it's like a potential atonement made, little to no sense.
Yeah.
And it's the thing that drove people crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you get a lot of your 4-point, Calvinists that's the one they drop off,
And I don't even know if you could call yourself a Calvinist. I know I'm going to get annoying. People are going to get annoyed with that, but
you're going to get in trouble.
Historically, you're an Amoraldian. I'm sorry, but people talk, there's a 4-point Calvin. That technically is not Calvinism. If you want to use a specific term to describe a group that believe this doctrine, technically it's not Calvinism, but I digress. Anyway, whatever it is, 4.5 point. No, people feel
for me, it was just incredible, because after that I started gobbling up everything I could get my hands on, and from there just started going reading the Puritans and Reformers, and it was, I remember my mentor telling me, and I felt the same way. He said, aside from the day of my salvation, he said, I think that coming to a proper understanding of Reformed theology was like the greatest moment in my Christian walk, because you feel like you finally see God's word in an incredible, amazing way, and it was just it was incredible. And in Sproul's book is what kicked that off for me, and it was so there's this kind of a special place in my heart, for Sproul's work, because it's kind of like, well, that's, and obviously it's the Lord, right, that opened my eyes and kind of brought me. But I mean, he used Sproul's work really to bring me to that point, and I'm eternally grateful.
Yeah, it'd be probably like if I was ever talking about, well, I don't think Joel Beakey laid at any specific point to my. Probably I read Joel Beakey later, but he would have a special place for me, because his writings have been a tremendous blessing to me. There's a very good book for those. I'll just grab it there.
Yeah. I've recommended this book several times.
Yeah, it's called Living for God's Grace: An Introduction to Calvinism. And it's not like a cold, just hear the doctrines, boom, 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 boom. It's talking about living these truths out.
For God's glory.
Living for God's glory. It's excellent. More stuff needs to be written about this from this perspective. What
I think is beautiful about that book is that, and I'll never forget the man who mentored me saying the same thing to me. He said, and this is really the road that Joel Beakey's book walks down there, is my mentor said to me, Brandon, it's wonderful that you've got this great understanding and knowledge about Reformed theology. He said, but if it's just a bunch of stuff then what good is it? What does it matter? He posed the question to me, how does the fact that you're Reformed versus somebody who's Arminian, let's say, or inconsistent Arminian,
how does it change your life?
What does that look like practically on a day-to-day basis? How does that change you? And I think this is what that living for God's glory, what Joel Beakey tackles really is that. And how does that change you practically? How does it change your life?
Heart and hands.
And hands.
It's got to be in your head. It can't be an anti-intellectual thing. And there's been extremes the other way. Heart, your affections. Jonathan Edwards wrote a book about religious affections and things like that. And then hands, are you going to apply it? Are you going to go do it? It's got it, and I think that's the problem with a lot of modern Calvinism. There's a complete disconnect between what has been put out there. Everything's a debate about the 5 points, but it doesn't seem to go much further. It's kind of a very antinomian, hipster kind of Calvinism today. Just what else could you call it?
And I think that's a lot of people misunderstand. They think that the doctrines were created in a vacuum, the doctrines of grace, that is, that were created in a vacuum, and that essentially that's where Reformed theology starts, is with the doctrines of grace, and that it's not that at all. I mean, the doctrines of grace are a byproduct of the covenants. I mean, you look at you want to start somewhere, start with covenant theology. Let's look at covenant theology. Let's talk about covenant theology.
Let's do that.
Let's do that. Oh, let's do that. Have a debate, Paul. No, but start with start there, and then it branches out from there, and it's really, you see how it all interconnects, and it's a beautiful thing. So,
just to wrap up, we're just going to look at these very, very briefly. We had, and we're not going to really talk about this too much, really. I don't know if you've ever looked into Greek Orthodoxy too much. Hanegraaff a few months ago, leaving for Greek Orthodoxy.
That's just one of the 20 topics that we still have, Paul. So you need to tell your listeners kick back for a while and just.
We're not going to talk about it for very long, but I mean, I've seen a lot of. It is kind of heavily synergistic, and has been from the early church. Going back even since a little bit after Chrysostom, who would have been the early church. Very problematic, very concerning, which would be an underestimation. But Greek Orthodoxy, I mean, I don't think we should water down our stance towards Greek Orthodoxy in any way, shape, or form. Heavily mysticism, heavily reliant on the sacraments, and from what I can see, almost no reliance on the Word of God. So, could you say Hank Hanegraaff has a credible profession of faith anymore? And I couldn't say that he would. But I digress. Anyway, but there was there was that. I never talked about this in the program, but the death of Hugh Hefner. That's what some people asked me to talk about. I didn't want to do a whole program on it because it's just kind of gross. Just don't want to talk about him for that long. But I suppose when you just see, in some ways it's only R.C. Sproul dies and not many people care. It's just except in Christian circles. But then somebody like Hugh Hefner dies, who basically corrupted the nation. It was Alfred Kinsey's pamphleteer.
Yeah, this man had a massive effect on the modern culture in a very, very horrific way, and just commercialized sex beyond belief
and pornography
and
apparently I read somewhere that apparently Playboy doesn't even do pornography anymore, that it's become it's so everywhere that there's nothing shocking about pornography anymore, that they don't even do whatever. I don't know, I've never, I'm not going to go and confirm it or anything like that, but the thing is, I mean, that's how far it's gone, that now that is seen as nothing, and the thing is, I mean, and it's the same with unfortunately, the same inspiration for somebody like Hefner is the same inspiration for the movement of the LGBT within the church. They talk about, oh, well, we're just born that way, can't do anything about it. It's completely natural, normal. Came from Alfred Kinsey's research, 2 books, Sexuality in the Human Male, I think that was 1948, Sexuality in the Human Female, 1953. 1953 is when Playboy magazine started. You had, I think it was 1955, Harry Hay started the gay rights movement. I might be wrong on that date. And you have Harry Hay with a T-shirt that says, NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association, walks with me, a pedophile organization. And they might say, are you saying that every homosexual is a pedophile? No, I'm not. I'm saying that they walked hand in hand. They eventually decoupled because obviously it's not good press. But it's still been happening. Salon magazine giving the big thumbs up to a bunch, talk about virtuous pedophiles. Salon, that's great.
Well, and I remember after here in America, after it had been voted to legalize homosexual marriage here, you had out of the woodworks coming, pedophiles who were going, well, hey, if the homosexuals are born with their little homosexual inclinations, well, we're also born with it too. So, stop vilifying us. And the question is, when you get to that point, where does it stop? When we get away, when we get away from God's word and we reject the clear commandments of the Lord, where does it stop? It doesn't. It keeps going. Why not marry your dog? Why not marry your I don't know, your sofa? Where does it stop?
Because and the thing is, I don't think people realize how dark the history of the sexual revolution is. I'm not going to describe it in great detail because it's so horrific, but for some of Kinsey's research, Judith Reisman has done excellent research on this. She's not a Christian, but she's done really, really good research on this, and she's written a number of books on it. But I can't remember which book it was, Sexuality in Human Male or Sexuality in Human Female. These are big books. They sold a lot, actually. But like I think they were like #1 bestsellers back in the day. But in one of those books, I can't remember the table, but there was research from apparent orgasms with children as young as 4 months old. And I don't even want to get any further than that. It was even he got some of his research from Van Balusek, who was a Nazi pedophile who was abusing and writing down all this stuff of his scientific research. And this stuff is the bedrock of the model penal code and much of the laws. You want to and I remember I was at work one day, right? And there was a guy who was working there, and he was a leftist, and he was giving out about, he was trying to pin it on everything as a right-wing conspiracy. He was like saying, right, what was it? They let him out after a few years and all that. And I said, you do realize why that is, right? For Kinsey, the father of sexual revolution, he stopped talking fairly quickly. See, everything has to fit the narrative, and if it doesn't fit in, I mean, he'd listen, nod and nod, but they're not interested in the truth. They're interested in, here's the narrative, here's how we're going to put it forth. But then you see like Hugh Hefner. I think people forget the connection between. I mean, if you go back even further, Aleister Crowley was a big influence on Alfred Kinsey. He visited the Valley of Thelema, which was that kind of weird temple that he had. What was it, in Sicily, I think it was, and lots of weird. That's all I can just say. Weird people visited there. L. Ron Hubbard, who started Scientology, he influenced so many people. But then one of them was Alfred Kinsey, and a lot of the pornography that was legalized, and it was just basically on this. Hefner would go around in talk shows and say it was okay. There was no big problem with premarital sex and all this kind of stuff. And like he corrupted, not single-handedly, I don't think he's the only person who did it. You have to look back to the 1940s. A lot of fathers died in the Second World War. You think 20 years later, what happened? You had the 60s. You had the... And it's just kind of shows you, if you look at communities and the fathers are missing, I think there's a massive correlation between the two. And it just shows the importance, the feminist movement, further trying to get fathers out of the roles, make it a lot easier for divorces to happen, for women to get custody, because they'll always win a custody battle, make them level pegging. So a lot of these stuff happened. And I think, I might be wrong on this, Alfred Kinsey also had research to say that, because his research was based on felons, people were in prison, it wasn't a normal population. Whatever the case, it's wrong, whatever the case, that abortions were normal. This is the argument today. Oh, well, loads of people are having abortions in secret. Let's just do it openly. People are traveling to another country. How will you dare make these poor women travel to another country to butcher their babies? Yeah, great argument. That's what's happening in Ireland right now. But it's based on the perversions of a man who died. Alfred Kinsey, now I'm talking about, from his own perversions. He actually, it's gruesome how some of these guys. But Hefner is seen as the kind of enjoy your life. And you know what the scary thing? Here's the scary thing about Hefner. Hefner's seen as normal today. Hefner 40 years ago was like, like all this kind of stuff. Now Hefner's probably going, he's probably thinking, before he, met his fate, but like that he was like being risque and dangerous and doing all the things that, lost men wanted to do. And then at the end, it was like, oh, okay. Just another reality TV star.
And that's what I was going to say too. There used to be some shame in this stuff, and you look back to, like old reruns of like I Love Lucy, and I
can't even remember what that was about.
Well, the thing is you look at like these old 50s shows, and the husband and wife, whenever they film them sleeping, they're not even in the same bed together. To even suggest the idea of divorce was like, oh, you don't do that. You don't talk about divorce. You don't divorce. And
now we're happy if a movie doesn't have sex in it. Now we're happy if there's no,
Here was another bizarre thing was I read that if you watch some of the episodes where Lucille Ball is, her character is pregnant, they didn't use the term pregnant in the show. They couldn't use the term pregnant. So whenever they talk about her, they would say she's going to have a baby.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't use the term pregnant because it was seen as almost like it was an awkward term. It was an awkward sort of weird term that they didn't want to use publicly. But you see how far, there used to be shame in that kind of stuff, and now it's full-fledged.
And now it's the social justice warriors shouting down Ben Shapiro, going, "Shame, shame." I don't know if you ever saw those videos, but that's all it is now. They have their own morality. They have their own.
Sure.
It's basically, you offend people, hate speech. Oh, you say something nasty about me. Your mental health now is the good, high self-esteem and all this kind of stuff. That is the idol of man today. It's just like, how do you feel based on feelings and stuff like that.
Well, and when everybody does what's right in their own eyes, I mean, this is what you get. When you are your own authority and you have no moral authority, no moral lawgiver, that is the Word of God. That is, then you're your own authority. Everything's subjective, and you're going to do whatever you think. There's no truth, and so I'm free to do whatever I want.
Which covers the next thing on our list. I think we can cross that off. The LGBT movement. We talked about that because that's all it is. It's basically saying everything's good. There's no right or wrong, except if it feels good. Except when it doesn't feel good. I mean, it's like, where do you draw a line? It becomes the new morality and everything else.
And that's the thing. Nobody is 100% completely subjective all the time. You can't be. For everyone, there's a line somewhere. There's a line. You're objective about something.
Mm-hmm.
So to even say that there is no truth is you're stating an objective truth.
Are you absolutely sure there is no absolute truth?
Right. Exactly. So, but again, it's just you're running on your feet, and this is just proof of what happens when we don't have the Word of God as our authority.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think this is the last thing we talked about Tim Keller and the whole ballet dancer thing, because that was a regular principle of worship. I think I had heard that was a big issue. I think one of the reasons I covered it in the program was I'd heard, to be honest, really, really bad arguments against it. That actually kind of weirdly ties into this. Everybody was just saying, it's gay. Yeah. I heard 3 people, not going to mention their names, but you know who you are. That's not an argument. I'm sorry. Yeah. Some of you are good theologians, 1 or 2 of you aren't. But, that's not an argument to say it's a bit effeminate. Where, talk about subjective, you need a standard. So, anyway, but we need to get back to the regular principle of worship. Second commandment: we can't approach God with our own imagination. Otherwise, we can add whatever we want. We can add painting or stage performance. Why not? I mean, if you can write a song and do whatever you want and add piano, people say, "Well, where does it say in the Bible about piano being there?" That's true. The Levitical priesthood were given a set amount of instruments that they were allowed to play. It was within the temple. It was before the sacrifice and things like that. It was heavily regulated in the Old Testament. Apparently, then it's like in the New Testament. Hey, have at it. Go free for all. But that's a huge topic probably for another day. But I think that's what people need to get back to. They need to get back to reading what Calvin wrote about the use of instruments. And this might sound like a kooky view that I have. I mean, Spurgeon was against the use of instruments in worship. Why? Because Calvin made the point that if you're going to have instruments in worship, well, why not have the showbread and everything else that was in the temple? So, and this is a widely held view that goes back. Even the Wesleys, who John and Charles Wesley were against the use of instruments in worship. Not a big fan of their theology a lot of the time, but it was fairly. Instruments was kind of like boom. They were like the debate about man-made hymns and all that came later. But whatever the case is, the church was very unified about no use of instruments up until about 200 years ago. So I mean, it's a good thing for people to study and look into. But we're about 2 hours and 22 minutes into the show. Probably not a good time to start on such a massive topic. Last thing we're going to look at, finishing off with, I suppose, what would you call it? Kind of apostatizing on the issue of LGBT. Eugene Peterson, who's a PCUSA church.
Yeah.
If you can still call it that.
They've really been
support for same-sex marriage and then retraction of it. Any comments yourself?
Yeah, it's coming out of PCUSA. I guess it's not surprising because PCUSA has been leading. It seems like they've been kind of leading the charge in hey, homosexuality is okay, doing the same-sex marriage. Even lesbian pastors. I mean, the stuff that's coming out of the PCUSA
not just bad enough
is really
that it's not a husband and one wife. It's
right.
We're not talking about once you start distorting the scriptures, there's no standards anymore.
Yeah, it's atrocious. And for those of you don't know, maybe Eugene Peterson, he is the creator of the Message Bible, which is not a Bible translation. To be clear, it's a paraphrase, a very sore one at best. And Eugene Peterson has apparently he made comments, and all this is kind of, it's really interesting because some of the stuff it sounds like was said in secret or in private. Based on the article, this is an article from Christianity Today, and allegedly there was an interviewer named Jonathan Merritt who had interviewed Eugene Peterson by phone, I guess it was, and he'd asked Eugene Peterson if
he's quite left-leaning, I think, Jonathan Merritt, isn't he? I think. Yeah, he is RNS columnist. Anyways, he had asked a hypothetical question to Eugene Peterson, asking him, hey, if you were pastoring today, because Eugene Peterson, he's 84 years old, he's retired. The columnist asked if you were pastoring today and a gay couple were to come to your church and they were, quote unquote Christians of good faith, and they asked you to perform a same-sex wedding ceremony for them. Yeah. The columnist asked Eugene Peterson, would you do this? Apparently Peterson's response was yes. Well, for about 3 or 4 weeks, I think afterwards, he caught a lot of, or maybe it was even less than that. Maybe it was only I think it was a few days, but I'll be honest, at the time I didn't.
Oh, was it even less? Okay.
I don't know, because I didn't follow the story when it came out first. Everybody else was commenting on it, and you know what I said? Everybody else is talking about it. I'll leave it alone.
Yeah. And so this was back in July of 2017. And so he recanted. Now, see, what happened too is Lifeway Christian bookstores, who was carrying all of his material, threatened to pull all of his stuff. Well, in the wake of that threat, he came out and he recanted, I guess. He retracted his statement.
It's bad for business.
Yeah, and you kind of wonder, and Lifeway said in light of the retraction, they were going to keep his material, but he's a big selling author, and I think
oh, he's huge. The fact that Bono loves him.
Yeah,
Bono from U2, in case anybody's wondering.
Yeah, and I think that Hillsong New York, I think that's the official quote unquote translation that they use is the Message.
This is
Bible.
The church that Michael Brown loves defending, Hillsong New York City.
Right.
I think
exactly.
any church using the Message. What? I mean, I think, all you need to do, I don't even think you need to do a refutation anymore. Just kind of go, they use the Message, we're done. Rick,
right.
The Message is like, I want to torture scripture and I want to make it say anything I want. That's the Message for you. And the Message is, I don't know, would you even call it a Bible commentary? I mean, it's just,
no,
it's not even, it's just so bad. I mean, It's not even anywhere close. I remember one time, yeah, actually, I was doing a program on Carl Lentz from Hillsong, New York City, a few months ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, looking at the screen, and it's like, I think it was Second Thessalonians. It's like, it doesn't say that. It's completely different. What translation is that? MSG. It sounds like a disease, actually. But,
Yeah. Is it in your food or?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Is there something called put in your food? Oh man, it's late. Anyway,
Yeah, MSG. Yeah.
is there? Yeah, MSG. Oh, that's kind of strange.
Yeah.
But the message. I mean, it's just. I mean, it's. Well, I remember Bono talking about in 2002. He loves the message, it's quote unquote translation. He says, "Finally, a Bible that speaks to me." Well, Bono was like,
it was 2002. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I think I might do something on Bono's, like, probably the fact that I'm Irish and all that. Nobody, there was one program upon his professed Christian faith. It's so mystical and so out there and just so, it's extremely liberal. Liberal churches love him, on the island.
Yeah, and he wouldn't like your exclusive psalmicity because here's the thing. He commented about how it's difficult for him to even really go through the Psalms unless there's a good melody to it. So
apparently a lot of the early albums, I was listening to stuff. This was just random on Irish radio the other day, and there was a pastor from Belfast. He was a Presbyterian Church of Ireland pastor, I think, and a lot of their pastors are very liberal. They lost some female pastors and stuff like that. And he was talking about he loved Bono. He wrote a book about them and talked about how a lot of the early albums like Joshua Tree and all this, and I have no idea. I never was into U2, never was into them. I always thought Bono was kind of pretentious when I was a metalhead. So I knew of metalers who were into U2. I never got it, and I was like, whatever. I kind of just was one of those things I skipped over. But apparently,
you're gonna get letters now. You're gonna get letters now. You know that.
Probably emails.
Yeah.
If letters would be a lot more fun. But we're like, ooh, who's this from? But I was gonna say, like, I mean, yeah, apparently there's a lot of a kind of a mystical, biblical language, not orthodox, but a lot of biblical references. Now, to be honest, I remember when I was writing metal songs years ago when I was in bands, a lot of my lyrics would have been very biblical sounding, but I hated God, and it just sounded. It's amazing how I was like going, whoa. Or sometimes I write these things on the. I mean, things that rock bands, but they kind of try to spiritualize it to make it sound like anything, and that's one of the things with that kind of music. It's so subjective. You could take it any way you want to.
Here's one comment I will mention that going back to Eugene Peterson just really quick. One comment in this article that I found very, very disturbing. But he made mention of the hypothetical question that the reporter asked him. And this is what he says, quote, "This reporter, however, asked a hypothetical question. If I were pastoring today, and if a gay couple were Christians of good faith, and if they asked me to perform their wedding ceremony, if, pastors don't have the luxury of indulging in hypotheticals, and to be honest, no is not a word I typically use," end quote. Well, that's a problem. That's a problem. If we're sticking to the word of God and you're saying no is not a word I typically use, there's some issues there that are going to come up real quick, right?
Oh, yeah. And it's like the fact that it took, something that was going to hit his pocket, which is interesting at his stage of life. You think, but you get yourself right with your creator. I don't know. Yeah, it's like those stories. It's just astonishing that is a brand of Christianity that people want to hold on to. But those liberal churches, they do it in order to, in their eyes, keep people in the church, but they just end up. Yeah. You get unregenerate parents, and then they raise unregenerate kids, and those unregenerate kids, they're bored. They want to go out and get
Yeah.
drunk and do all that kind of stuff. Why? Because they're unregenerate and they love the things of the world. So,
Right.
and that's kind of the way it goes after a while and they get emptied out. The last, actually, I spotted one more. Yeah, speaking of alcohol use and a couple other things, Perry Noble. I don't know if you ever heard of Perry Noble.
From South Carolina, right? Pastor in
Yeah.
South Carolina.
Yeah, he reemerged and during the year as well. And I promise this is the last. Yeah, it's the last one. Big news. Anyway, but what was it? He had to resign a year previous over alcohol use. Years ago, he admitted to pornography problems as well, and on Facebook admitted. What was it? He said, "I am not qualified.
I am unqualified." He goes through a big rant where he talks about how he was unqualified.
Yeah,
and essentially, and what he makes it sound like is that, I don't live up to all these qualifications that 1 Timothy chapter 3 lays out, but hey, who does?
Exactly. So nobody can match them.
Yeah.
Well, a husband of one wife, that seems attainable. Let's look at and not that I necessarily wanted to look at that, but yes, in order to even, if you're thinking about the ministry, you've got to fit these qualifications, and if you don't, forget about it. You're not qualified. It's a good office. If a man desire an office of a bishop, he desired the good work. Husband of one wife, which actually means, it doesn't mean you have to be married. It literally means a one woman man.
Yeah.
Literally, like if you're married, make sure it's one, because polygamy was an issue back then. Vigilant, sober, and that means not even necessarily with drunkenness or anything like that, but just kind of sober in judgment and things like that. Good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach. Like you're skillful. Yeah. Things like that. And then talks about ruleth well over his own household. If we don't, the church is in massive trouble. If the elders are not godly men who love the Lord, who fit these qualifications, which are things that we should aim for, even if we're not called to the ministry. So.
You skipped over one of my favorite King James version. Yeah, you skipped over one of my favorite King James versions where it says, "Not greedy of filthy lucre."
Yes.
Yeah, not greedy of filthy lucre. I mean, in other words, not greedy for money.
Yeah. And when I saw him at Stephen Furtick's church, he was at Elevation Church preaching. I was just astonished. I thought Perry Noble got so disgraced. I've never talked about him in the program before. Actually, this is the first time ever. I thought he got so disgraced he would never come back. But the fact is, not only that he's got the gall to come back, his previous church says he's not qualified. But not only has he got the gall to come back, people are supporting him. That's astonishing. I mean, that's astonishing for me. I mean, I'm not going to comment on it too much. You know why? Because if it gets to the point where you don't care, here are the qualifications, you just don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes to the point where you have to mark those people and avoid them. Any last thoughts, brother, about 2017? Are you glad it's over?
A crazy year, but no, it was a blessing. I mean, just to see the Lord using these ministries, to be he's used your ministry for a number of years now. He's been using my ministry and both ministries that I'm involved in for the past year, and it's just really been a blessing. Just the opportunities that he's given me, and it's a blessing to get to know you two and kind of grow in our friendship, which has been
we
cool.
Have these conversations. They're just not normally a program. Going quite a while.
Yeah, I'm typically not in a suit, but Paul said I couldn't come on unless I wore a suit, so
it was part of the contract. You have to fax it back to me. You never signed it.
That's true. Yeah, I'll get that back to you as soon as possible.
Yeah. Oh man, it's been a lot of fun actually. Lord willing, we can do this again next year, because I was just like, oh man, I'm not usually a fan of these types of shows. Sometimes I just said, okay, we'll do. I think it worked well. I enjoyed it. Hopefully you enjoyed it. if you've got any suggestions maybe for next year, megiddofilms@gmail.com. Sometimes it's good to mix it up, do slightly different things in the program, different topics, different styles. I keep asking for your suggestions, people listening, because I'll be honest, this is show number 299. The next one will be show 300. It's kind of
You mean I missed your 300th show? I was just shy of it.
That's next week. That'll be next week.
No, I know, but I wasn't on your 300th show. See, I missed that.
It would have been cool if it coincided, but yeah, I was like, the fact that I missed a show in December messed it all up. But the thing is, like, I mean, I want to keep keeping the show fresh, different things, but not fresh in a kind of like, let's reinvent the wheel. But I mean, if there's things, I don't always cover everything that people send in, but I really, how would I put it, consider them. But sometimes I don't have anything to add to that, or I might link to somebody else, or I've already done a program on it. But again, any suggestions, megiddofilms@gmail.com, or find me on Facebook or Twitter. The Twitter handle, Megiddo Films. You can find Brandon Lochridge on Twitter, Facebook, etc., and so on. And I hope you've been blessed by this. Comments. Do you have an email address, brother?
Yeah, fullarmorradio@icloud.com, and the website is fullarmorradio.org. And yeah, I'm on. So Full Armor Radio. You can just search Full Armor Radio on
and
Facebook,
that's the American
Twitter.
Spelling for armor.
That is the American. Yes. ARMOR. You still, even here in the United States, I get plenty of people that spell it with the U, and I'm like, man, that's maybe, I don't know. Should I change it? I don't know.
Nah, leave it now. Because I'm even looking at William Gurnell's book. The Christian in Complete Armor. Because it's like, yeah. As long as it's spelled right, which it is.
Yeah. Well, I maybe I should. The King James spelling is way
superior. Yeah, superior. Okay, thank you, brother, so much for being on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Lord willing, we'll see you in the new year. I don't know what day is Saturday of next week. I'm going to take next Tuesday off. I think I need a bit of a break after a 2-hour and 40-minute show. Thank you for tuning in. God bless you. Talk to you again next week, and Happy New Year.